All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to go through and make sure your audio is working and verify which item you'd like to speak on, if that's all right. Ms. Winters, we'll start with you. You're first on my row. Would you like to speak on the memory care, other items not on the agenda, or the water master plan?
The memory care.
Memory care. All right. We'll put you as first in line. And it looks like your audio is working great. Perfect. All right. And Eddie, hello. I see you there. I just want to check your audio real quick.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Perfect. All right. If you want to remute yourself. And then let's see, Mark, would you like to testify or you just want to watch?
Watching.
Perfect. All right, and Patty is staff. Petronella, we want to check your audio to see if you want to speak.
Hello.
All right.
Me?
We can hear you just great. Perfect. And Jerry, would you like to testify or would you just like to watch the hearing?
I'd like to testify.
You would like to testify. All right, we'll put you after Miss Winters. Let's see. So it sounds like everyone's audio is working. If you want to mute yourselves, and then when it's time to speak, then we will ask you when you testify to state your name and city of residence for the record. Let's see. We're still letting people into the room. Thank you for your patience. We had a meeting before this one. All right, welcome Venro Wilson. I just want to check in with you, make sure your audio is working and verify if you would like to testify at any items tonight. Venro Wilson. Vero Wilson. It looks like you are muted and there's no video. If you'd like to testify, we'll do another call out at a later time. All right. Okay. 7:01. I will pass it over to you, Chair, if you would like to start. I have the list of people to testify, and then if you would want to check back in at each item to see if there's anybody else who'd like to speak.
Okay, thank you. So I will call to order the Monday, December 14th, 2020 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. The first item on our agenda is approval of minutes from July 13th, 2020. Commissioners have had an opportunity to review those minutes. Are there any corrections or comments or additions to the minutes? I don't see any. I don't. So do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes. What was the date?
July 13th, 2020.
The July 13th, 2020 minutes. Motion to approve those.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Schlagenhofer, second by Commissioner Stoll. Call the roll.
All right. Commissioner Schlagenhofer.
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll.
Aye.
Commissioner Gage.
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs.
Aye.
And Chair Mitchell. All right,
Aye.
everyone.
Okay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. We are on to public comment, and this is public comment on items not on our agenda. So we do have two public hearings on our agenda. Is there anyone wishing to comment on anything that is not on our agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public hearing number 1, GLUA-20-00020, residential and memory care facility at 182 Warner Parrott Road. And just a reminder, this is a continuation and the public record is still open on that matter. And we want to begin, we're going to go back because of the length of time that has transpired since we first started talking about this project. We want to go back and get back on the record. We're going to go through the disclosures from each of the planning commissioners, and let's talk again about all three things: conflict of interest, ex parte contact, and site visit, just to get all that back on the record. So we'll start. Commissioner Gage.
I have no ex parte contact. I have done a site visit, and I have no conflict of interest.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Guile. All right, you're muted, it looks like.
Okay, still learning this Zoom stuff. I've driven by the site a few times. I've not done an extensive search of the site, no conflict of interest. And I'm not sure if it's ex parte contact, but I asked people who aren't in Oregon City, people I know have had people in memory care, how often they visited the person, if it was a parent or grandparent. And I did that extensively. I just want to know, do people really just not go and visit their loved ones? And I got quite a variety of responses to that. If that's ex parte, I've done that, but not here in Oregon City.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for disclosing that. Commissioner Johnson,
Sorry.
Ms. Richter, go ahead.
Commissioner Guile, can you explain what you found, what you learned from that survey? What information did you get? It's important that that information is part of the record so everybody has a chance to respond to it.
Sure. I found that a lot of people did still visit because they thought there might be days when somebody's more alert and they wanted to let their loved ones know that they cared and that they were there. And even if they weren't there mentally, they, on their behalf, wanted to be there. The main thing I was searching was how often they visited, did they care to visit? And for some of those, I was mainly concerned about parking. So I wanted to find out, again, some of them, they're on the west side of Portland and all around. So that was my main thing. I wanted to see, do people go to visit, or is it just once somebody's house somewhere, that's it? Does that kind of answer your question?
And what did you, and what conclusions did you draw from that information?
That people do still love, still do care, and that they do want to visit their loved one, parent or grandparent.
So do you have any quantifiable information about that?
No, just asked to see what people thought. I've known a lot of people who have had parents and grandparents in this situation. And I was mainly concerned about, I didn't ask them about their parking conditions there. I just wanted to know if they visited and how often they visited. Nothing quantifiable.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
Glad you did. We got to get these things on the record. Commissioner Schlagenhofer, your disclosures.
No conflicts of interest. I had no ex parte contact. I did go visit the site since the latest information from Pete. I just wanted to get a better feeling of what we were looking at with the new information we got. And that was a couple days ago. And that was it. I didn't talk to anybody there. Basically pulled into the front, drove around the site a few times, looked at it from all angles. That was about it.
Okay, thank you. Did you say anything about ex parte contacts and contacting this? I may have missed it.
Oh, yeah, sorry. No conflicts of interest, and I had no ex parte contact.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Staggs.
I've had no ex parte contact. I have no conflict of interest, and I have visited the site.
Commissioner Stoll.
No conflicts of interest, no ex parte contact. I've driven by the site 3 times. I drove by today. I intended to park on the curb and look, but there was construction that had closed the curb lane. The curb lane was the travel lane today, so I wasn't able to stop. But I have done 3 drive-bys.
Thank you. And for myself, no conflict of interest, no ex parte contact. And I visited the site previously, and then I did visit it again today. And I did park and walk around and took a more extensive site visit today.
Mike,
Does
and
any-
others, when I'm talking, this is my first time on Zoom. Do I sound like I'm yelling? Because I'm used
No.
to, it's like being on a cell phone. You have to yell into it. I'm okay, volume wise.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds normal.
Okay, so at this point, does anyone listening wish to question any of the commissioners about any of the disclosures they just made?
No.
Did someone, was that a no?
That was the no.
Okay. All right, then we will move on with the staff report, and I believe that is Mr. Walter.
Would you like me to read the legal proceeding first, or would you like to read it?
Oh, do we need to read it again?
Yeah.
I think we do. Yeah.
Okay. I'll get my glasses on and read it. Okay. One public hearing on land use application is scheduled tonight. Our goal is to conduct a public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask commissioners whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question, which we've done. I will also ask whether any of the commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question, which we've covered. Any member of the audience may question any commissioner about their disclosures, which we've covered. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the public hearing. Staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. Quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. Hearing procedure steps are on the chart on the wall at City Hall, where we're not tonight. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city may notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they're not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence or testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both, without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to. The issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. And as I mentioned before, the public record is still open. The hearings, this is a continuation, so we'll move on now to the staff report. Mr. Walter.
Right. Can everybody hear me and see this?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the public and planning commissioners and Chair Mitchell. My name is Pete Walter, Senior Planner. I'm going to try to keep my presentation to 15 minutes, but there are a lot of public comments that I wanted to address. So please excuse me if it runs over a little bit. This is a 30-bed assisted living facility with memory care at 182 Warner Parrott Road. This was continued from November 23rd. There have been a lot of continuances of this public hearing, and those have all been necessary for the applicant to have time to provide additional exhibits and testimony in response to the concerns of the public and requests from the Planning Commission. And there has been early and often communications with the applicant regarding all of these continuances. This is an aerial photograph of the existing site. This is a 2019 photograph. Existing conditions are, it is in the R10 low density residential zone. Current use is a 5-bed adult care home. You have a lot size of approximately 24,000 square feet. And the current lot coverage is about 16%, and the zone allows 40%. Building height, and we measure building height as halfway between the peak and eave, is 24 foot, which is a very standard height for a 2-story residential structure. And that is also with the height proposed for the extension. There is currently a 20-foot wide paved driveway access on the Warner Parrott Road, a 7-foot curb tight sidewalk with an 8-foot parking lane, 5-foot bike lane, and 11-foot travel lanes. The speed limit there is 20 miles per hour because it is in a school zone. Proposed use is to expand this to a residential care facility with 30 beds. The lot size will not change. The lot coverage obviously would change to 9,132 square foot building footprint, which puts it just under the 40% allowable in the code. And a 30-foot wide paved driveway access with a turnaround on site for safety. There are 7 parking spaces and 1 loading space provided on site, and that is the maximum permitted under the parking code. The building height, as I mentioned, is proposed at 24 to 25 feet, and all the setbacks that are proposed comply with the R10 zone. The distances that I've shown in this colored table here are the shortest setbacks that are listed for the left and right. And then the front setback is 10 foot 2 inches. And that is a requirement for an institutional building. If you are building a new institutional building or making a major expansion to an existing building for an institutional use, the code requires that you bring that building as close to the public right of way as possible to allow pedestrian interaction with that building. If that setback is going to be larger, the applicant must provide pedestrian amenities in a proportion equal to the larger setback. You've seen these slides before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but they show the original proposal versus the revised proposal that you were shown at the last hearing and what the applicant has changed. This is a site plan indicating where the additional parking has been provided, how they've opened up the center courtyard to narrow the building and reduce the massing of the site. And this is the front elevation. Showing where the additional windows have been added to meet our 60% transparency requirement. This is the east or left side of the building, indicating where the center courtyard is being opened up and how they've changed the roof peak to reduce that roof's height. And this is the right or west elevation indicating those changes. This is a landscaping plan and how you can see how it's been modified to add pedestrian amenities in the front. They've added 3 pedestrian amenities compared to the original site plan. And also they've had to modify their landscaping to accommodate 3 more parking spaces and slightly change the size and location of the separate garbage enclosure, which is separated from the property line by the 5 feet. So here's a summary of those revisions. I won't go through those again. We can refer back to those if need be. This is the Google Street View existing conditions. And this is a concept rendering provided by the project architect of what the expansion would look like from the street. The applicant's newest submittals include a solar shading analysis. One of the concerns and comments that came out from the public was whether this will reduce light and increase shading on their property. The city does not have a solar shading code, and so the applicant went and provided an analysis based on the Lake Oswego code, which does have a shading analysis requirement. And that calculation is pretty complicated when you read through it. But I did read through it, and I was able to follow it and understand it. It is based on the lot dimension, which is over over 70 feet, pretty deep lot. And you calculate the maximum shade point height based on the lot dimension and the orientation of the lot in an east-west direction. So that final shade point height that was calculated is 28 feet, which is less than the height of the highest ridge point of the roof. And I will allow Eddie, the project architect, to elaborate on that calculation when the time comes, because I wasn't going to go into much more detail on that, except to say that we don't have a standard for it in Oregon City. Other cities do, and it appears to meet that code requirement. The applicant also provided a map indicating surrounding uses, which are not large lot single family. They include what's shown here, and we can refer back to this. They provided an aerial photograph from the south indicating roughly the red lines indicating where the expansion would be. And you can also see from this picture the existing shading. I don't know what time of year this photograph was taken, but you can see the shade that is cast from existing buildings there. They also provided an existing conditions survey at the request of the commission. I've been using this for some calculations, and so that is showing where the current setbacks are. In your staff report, we've gone through and provided findings for compliance with all of the following criteria listed here. In particular, this is a conditional use in an R10 zone. That means it's not allowed by right. There has to be a conditional use hearing before the Planning Commission in order to approve this use. And these are the criteria as follows. The use must be listed as a conditional use in the underlying district. This is a assisted living facility, which is listed as a conditional use for over 15 patients. The second criterion is that the characteristics of the site are suitable, considering size, shape, location, topography, the existence of improvements and natural features. And we have provided findings that indicate that those characteristics all exist for this property. Third criterion is that they must demonstrate compliance with our public improvements standards in OCMC 1612. There are some sewer and water connections, obviously, that need to be made in order to accommodate this expansion. There will not be any changes made to the existing sidewalk or street width. They're going to go with the existing constructed sidewalk and street width there, with the exception of the sidewalk of the driveway, which will be widened to meet the standards for commercial driveway. And the fourth criterion, which is very important, is that the proposed use not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which substantially limits, impairs, or precludes the use of surrounding properties for the primary uses listed in the district. And that is a very important statement, because if you read what the primary uses are, it lists first and foremost residential use, single family, detached, etc. So it is a subjective standard. Staff has analyzed that in detail and provided findings, and we feel that the proposed use would not substantially limit the ability of anybody to construct a single family detached home or any of the other primary uses listed in the underlying district. Whether people feel strongly that it would preclude their use of their property for various other reasons, which are obviously residential, and those include many of the concerns that the public has raised. That is up for the Planning Commission to decide, and I'm going to go into that in more detail. And finally, the fifth criterion is that the proposal satisfy the goals and policies of the city's comprehensive plan, which apply to that use. So we've done a fairly good attempt at making findings in compliance with that. And I'd like to go into a little more detail now on the public concerns that are on record, talk through this a little bit, and then provide some background and guidance on how these things are addressed. In no apparent order and no order of priority, but they're all things that were raised in several letters. So we're going to go through them. With respect to traffic, the applicant has provided a transportation analysis letter. The transportation analysis letter is prepared in accordance with the city's transportation analysis design guidelines. They have to be done by a traffic engineer, and they need to meet our mobility standards in chapter 16.12033. That letter also addresses a lot of site-specific things as well, such as spacing of the driveway from an intersection, site distance up and down the road, etc. Now, site distance was raised as an issue. That is whether your visibility is blocked by a permanent structure or vegetation when you're looking up and down the road, and it's based on the speed limit of that road. So the higher the speed limit, the shorter the site distance is. But in this situation, you got a 20 mile per hour zone because it's a school zone, and the site distance was found to be exceeded in both directions. I know there were concerns about vehicles parking on the street and blocking views as people come out of their driveways, etc. Vehicles are allowed to park in the public right of way. They are temporarily parked there, and there are no requirements with respect to vehicles blocking site distance. It's reasonable to expect that those vehicles are there for a temporary amount of time, and they can be moved, seen around. People, if there's a car parked in the right of way, people will tend to edge out of the driveway more slowly, which actually makes things safer. And as I said, it's a 20 mile per hour zone. So there should be, assuming people are complying with the speed limit, adequate time to react to oncoming vehicles based on the site distance, which was found to comply. In the transportation analysis letter, they also provided a crash analysis and analysis of safety, and all of that was found to be fairly safe. The applicant's traffic engineer spoke to that at the last hearing. Now we talk about off-street parking. So the applicant has provided 7 parking spaces for vehicles and 1 loading space, which is the maximum permitted under the code. They are also allowed to use parking that abuts their property, which is a public street, and anybody can park there. It is not a metered area. So our code allows people to park on the street. It also allows people to credit that parking towards their off-street parking requirements if they need to. In this case, they don't need that credit. They provided what the code permits and the maximum allowed for off-street parking. So as far as the parking code goes, if they were to propose any more parking than they currently have, it would require a parking adjustment application to the Planning Commission and an approval of that under the criteria. Building height. So the zone allows a 35-foot high building. They've proposed a 24-foot high building. And there's been concerns and comments about the 10-foot setback not matching existing development as well. As I mentioned, that is a requirement for a commercial or institutional building. They haven't gone right up against the property line because there's a public utility easement there that has to be 10 foot wide. And to accommodate that additional 10 foot of setback, the applicant proposed pedestrian amenities there. Building size and massing and height is obviously one of the principal concerns, and that concerns that was incompatible with adjacent existing structures. It is true that a lot of the structures around that are residential are single story, but it's not unusual to expect somebody to pull a building permit and build a 2-story building in that zone. And if that were the case, this building would be found to comply with the height requirements as far as the setback requirements. That said, it is a fairly large building, and the applicant has, through our institutional design standards, complied with the various articulation requirements and transparency requirements for windows that apply to institutional buildings so that they are not one massive structure. There's quite a bit of different variability in the setbacks on both sides of the building, and a lot of use of different materials as well that complies with 1762-055 design standards as well. So I know design compatibility is a subjective standard, but dimensional standards are not. So this does present, that is why this is a discretionary decision of the Planning Commission. With respect to shade and sunlight, we talked about that previously. The applicant did a shade analysis. If the Planning Commission wants to, they can require that the applicant, provide that analysis or comply with that requirement as a condition of approval, but they have shown that their height meets the shade analysis requirement of the Lake Oswego Code. It's not a city requirement, but they have addressed that issue. Talked about vehicles blocking sight distance. This meets our sight distance requirements. And as I said, it is reasonable to allow temporarily parked vehicles to park in the public right of way in the parking lane. There were concerns about impacts to offsite trees. So these are trees that are growing very close to or on almost the applicant's property line. In some cases, they're offsite, but they have a very large canopy area, and there's concerns that the construction would impact those trees. So this is not something that's addressed in the city code. It is something that is a civil matter between two neighbors who should talk about it and address that in more detail. If they have an arborist that wants to look at those trees and recommend how they minimize any impacts to those trees during construction, that would be something that they decide to do. But we can talk about that. They should address that. The applicant should address that in more detail. There's been concerns and comments that property values will drop. There's been no evidence to support that. It's not a criterion for approval. And then there's concerns about construction hours. Now, the city does have limitations on construction. For private on-site construction, those limitations are listed here: 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturday, and 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Sunday. That's for private construction. For public utility construction and work in the public right-of-way, the hours are slightly different. You can't do any of that work on a Sunday. But you can see with it 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday. If there are noise complaints during the construction process, the code enforcement department will investigate those and will address them based on whether they actually are exceeding our requirements or code standards. And there are also statements that this will impact the overall and general livability of the site. We attempted to address those concerns. There is one comprehensive plan goal that mentions the word livability in a very general way. It's the neighborhood livability goal. And we found that, they are consistent with that goal if they meet the conditions in this application. The applicant should address that in more detail. If, this livability thing could mean any number of things to any number of people. If there are very specific concerns, the applicant could be asked to address those or bring forward a proposal, possibly an agreement of some kind, possibly having a 24-hour point of contact to address any concerns with the neighbors. And that has been the sort of thing that we've recommended in the past. It's incumbent on both the applicant and the adjacent property owners to work together in that situation to work out an agreement, sometimes referred to as a good neighbor agreement, but it's not considered a remedy to everything. It really requires hard work and a meeting of the minds in order to hammer one of those out. So finally, public concerns with respect to loss of privacy due to the height and views from the windows. The applicant should address that in more detail. There's no code requirement that people close their windows or have blinds on their windows in order that they can't look out into somebody's yard. Given the nature of this proposed use, these are going to be elderly people who are in care. Their windows are probably going to be a very important part of their stay in this facility. I would ask the applicant to just address that and talk about their operation internally in more detail and what a typical day would consist of for a person living there. Since there are so many concerns, and the applicant has provided new information, but staff has not really had time to write any new findings based on that information because it was submitted so late. We are recommending that the Planning Commission continue this file to a date certain of January 11th, 2020. This will allow staff to fully analyze the new information and provide a recommendation and revised findings for your consideration at the January 11th, 2020 meeting. Thanks. That's my presentation, and I welcome any questions you have.
Okay, what questions do we have from commissioners for Mr. Walter? Commissioner Stoll.
Yeah, I pointed this out at the first hearing, and I need to point it out again. I don't know that it matters, but just so that all our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, this is not an assisted living facility. That's a different thing. This is a residential care facility. We should not be referring to it as an assisted living facility. It's residential care. I don't know that it matters, but just in the interest of completeness and accuracy, it's a residential care facility.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, and where are we at on 120 days in relation to January 11th?
Yeah, we have an extension currently to February the, where are we? Sorry, I gotta jump out of my screen here. 120. Currently, our extension is to February the 3rd, 2021. So if there isn't any further appeal, having continued this to the January 11th hearing, we would respectfully request the applicant provide a second extension of another 30 days for that.
And are we expecting to not have a meeting on December 28th?
That's correct.
I see Laura shaking her head. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Guile, since we can't see, I can't see whether or not you're raising your hand, I'll call on you now. Do you have any questions for Mr. Walter?
I was thinking of something. Did they increase the parking to 9 spots, or is it increased from 9 spots?
Originally, it was 4 spots. They increased it to 7 regular vehicle spaces and a loading space.
So it's 8, not 9. I wrote down 9 here.
It's 8.
And how many staff are there at any given time?
That's a question the applicant should answer. I don't know what the answer to that.
My question from the very beginning when this first came up was parking, because again, that's one of the questions I ask people, how often do you visit? And if there's enough parking for staff, the original response way back when we first started this, well, there's a parking lot across the street, they can park there and walk across. And that just didn't cut it for me because a lot of it's seniors who go to visit seniors that are in the home typically. So I'm still wondering about how many staff are there, how much of the parking spots that are within the area are going to be taken up by staff, and if anybody visiting is going to be forced to park on the street. And that impacts the neighborhood. That's my main concern here.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the parking code is based on the square footage of the use that we use. That's what our code.
Square footage of the whole floor itself, but if you have a second level, does that make a difference?
Gross floor area is what it's based on. So
gross floor area includes the second floor.
Second floor, yeah.
And I know this came up with a previous one that was brought up earlier this evening, Milner's. I know that you said that earlier, that there was
it's actually
maximum.
The minimum number of spaces is 1 space per 7 beds, and the maximum is 1 space per 5 beds. And then there's also an office there. So the number of spaces required for the facility is minimum is 4, maximum is 6, but then you throw the office in there and it's 7. The loading space is unmarked. It's along the driveway there. So, that's factored in, but it's
okay.
not counted.
And again, my main concern is, if it depends, I know what minimums and maximums are, but when people, typically the people that are in memory care are older, and it's older people coming to visit them. And I just don't want to see them having to park across roads to cross a busy road as it is. And I want to make sure that the neighborhood is feeling comfortable with the amount of parking spots that are being taken up on the side of the road. I see it in my own neighborhood. So my question still evolves around how many parking. Not everybody's going to come at the same time. Okay, you're all supposed to come here at 7 o'clock and that's it. People are going to do it throughout the day of visiting hours, but I'm just concerned about people having to drive around the blocks and parking further and deeper into the residential area. That's my main concern here. Okay.
Ms. Turway, something you wanted to add?
Yeah, since we're on the topic, I just wanted to acknowledge that there was testimony about a shared parking agreement offsite. And I want to reiterate what Pete had said, which is we have a parking maximum. If they want to go over the parking maximum, they'll have to get a parking adjustment. So they would have to apply for that, pay for that, have findings for that, which is not part of the record right now.
But Laura, didn't we just discuss this on an earlier date with having to do with a veterinarian service, that having them park in the neighborhood in the residential area was not fair, and we went ahead and granted a variance to allow them to have more parking close by because of this? I mean, this was
I don't think what we did in another case is something we want to get into now.
But Mike, what I'm getting at is the fact that parking, we've allowed extra parking beyond the max in other instances. So what's the difference for memory care when there's seniors involved?
Well, because they haven't asked for it.
Part of the difference here is they haven't asked for it.
Okay, but so we just put on the residents to deal with the parking into their neighborhood. I don't like that idea. Sorry.
Mr. Radulescu, I see you have your hand raised. You'll have an opportunity. You're going to be presenting as on behalf of the applicant, right? You'll be able to speak later. Let's hold it now to questions for Mr. Walter.
Sorry, you asked my opinion. Sorry, I gave it.
No, that's fine. Commissioner Schlagenhofer.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Walter or for the applicant, but I wanted a clarification on the use, because there's 2 things listed on the application. One of them is memory care and the other one is residential. What exactly does residential mean?
Well, as I understand it, residential care is one thing, and I believe they've got a memory care endorsement, but it is a question for the applicant to talk about.
Okay. All right, I'll wait then.
Zoning wise, we don't list memory care as a separate use. We would put it under the residential care.
Yeah, I think the licensing is different, but
Right,
That's
and I
for the
think
applicant.
it's
Thank you.
it has to do with licensing from the state.
okay.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Walter? I've got a couple. You mentioned the neighboring trees, and I did see at least a couple that are quite close to the property line.
Right.
Is it within our purview to put in a condition of approval that that measures be put in place to protect those trees that are on neighbors' property? Because it doesn't, I speak from sad experience, it doesn't do a lot of good after the fact, after the tree has been damaged. So would we be able to put something in condition of approval requiring protection for those close by trees?
Yeah, my question to myself is, if you did that, what criterion would you tie it to? And Carrie, you might be able to help me from a legal perspective. But my sense is that you would need to tie it to the fourth criterion, the conditional use here, which is that the proposed use not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which substantially limits, impairs, or precludes the use of the property as a residential use. This is a discretionary decision. If somebody makes the assertion that the primary use being residential, that includes enjoyment of the house and yard and the vegetation in it, I haven't seen this done before, so we're in new territory, but it seems common sense that if there is a tree that's worth saving, somebody should consult an expert, possibly a certified arborist, and see what they recommend as a means to protect the root area of that tree during construction, because there are ways to do it.
Okay.
Can I add something to that? Chair Mitchell, can I add something?
Sure.
Could something like that be put into a good neighbor agreement? Some expectations like that, if you wanted to protect the tree, or things that they expect of each other? Would that be one way to do it?
Well, I think it's such a specific thing that you might want to do it as a, if the applicant
Specific
agrees
criteria?
to, I'm going to do it as specific conditions. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Richter.
I would be I appreciate Mr. Walter's suggestion that what is the criterion you would be attaching the condition to. That's an important question, but the other thing is the city does not generally get involved in private property protection issues, and if the tree was damaged, there would potentially be a private trespass action that the neighboring property could pursue. I mean, I understand it's a little bit too late at that point, but I'm not sure that a condition necessarily protects the tree either. I think that Commissioner Schlagenhofer's suggestion about a good neighbor agreement might be a good suggestion. Perhaps like a joint agreement to pay for an arborist to come up with a appropriate protection plan in advance would be something that would help both parties.
Okay, I mean, maybe we can ask the applicant to address that in their remarks. Ms. Turway, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that in Chapter 1741, which is in the staff report right now, there is a provision that requires that the drip line of all trees that are not being removed be protected and fenced and labeled as such during construction. So there should be some at least preliminary measures in place during construction to make sure that there is that layer of protection.
Okay.
Laura, does that extend to trees that have their trunk off-site but the drip line on-site? That's a clarifying question.
I'll take a look because I think you have to fence the drip line.
Yeah, I know you have to fence the drip line. That's true. Yeah.
So then it would apply.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, thank you. The other question, and again, this gets to something if it would be within our purview to have in the conditions of approval. there's a huge difference between the permitted allowable construction hours for residential construction and for city infrastructure construction. One of which seems fairly reasonable, and the other does seem like it maybe is more than is reasonable for neighbors to expect. Can we put in the conditions of approval is spelled out now in terms of construction hours, if the commission wants to do that?
I think so.
I've not seen that done before. We do have our general nuisance code that applies. The difference in hours apply to different things. One applies to public infrastructure and one applies to private development. I would be interested to hear Carrie's perspective on us prohibiting development on private property, which does meet our nuisance code.
Am I still sharing my screen?
You are not.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Carrie.
My only thought about this again is why would the length of construction time be significantly longer for this project versus a single family residential house? If that construction time would be measurably longer, then I think perhaps there would be some greater impact that would be worthy of reduction, perhaps. But I think that the point that Mr. Walter raised, that a person could build a single family house this big and it would take that same amount of time to build as this project, calls into question the ability of the commission to reduce construction hours.
Commissioner Stoll?
Is there a difference between construction hours for a commercial project versus a residential project on private property?
I don't believe so. I think the code just lists private construction.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I've got one more thing, and I hate it when I find this kind of stuff in our code, but it seems to me like there's something that's conflicting. I understand the 5-foot front setback is for a commercial or institutional building, and we're going to 10 because of the easement. I get that. But when I look at 17.56.010C, which is the conditional use section of our code, it says any conditional use shall meet the dimensional standards of the zone in which it is to be located, which would tell me that that front setback ought to be 20 feet, which is what the R10 zone calls for. And I know, I understand, I guess, Pete, I'm just asking, how do you rectify those two things?
Well, it does say any conditional use shall meet the dimensional standards of the zone in which is located pursuant to subsection B of this section unless otherwise indicated. And unless otherwise indicated, I took to mean that it also had to meet 1762.055. That was the way I wrote my finding. If that is incorrect, then I guess the remedy would be to make it match the minimum, and then require the applicant to provide the requisite modification, which is usually involves adding pedestrian amenities for each additional 5 foot of setback.
Mr. White?
The reason why the planning division has interpreted it that way historically over time is because that the requirement for the setback for this type of use is more specific to this type of use. So we have a generic standard that says meet your setbacks unless otherwise specified. And then we have a standard that says for this specific use, which is the reason why you're doing the conditional use in the first place. Here's what the setback ought to be. And so that's why we have consistently implemented it. We've seen that with, schools and churches and other also
And
conditional uses.
Yeah, I just add, Laura, that the definition of institutional use does include residential care facilities in our 1704 definitions, chapter 17.04.
Okay, maybe that's something that I may be out, maybe the only one that's bothered by that. So, but we can get into that later on if necessary. Are there any other questions for Mr. Walter at this point? All right, we will hear from the applicant. Please begin with your name and city of residence. And I'd also appreciate knowing how you're related to the project. And you have 15 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Edward Radulescu, and I am a resident of Oregon City. And I am with the design team, Northwest Architecture and Design, located out of Portland, Oregon. I do want to address a few comments. I have a list here. I'll try to stay under 15 minutes, but and also because Pete addressed a few of them already. My first comment on my list here is regarding parking. As Pete mentioned, we have proposed the maximum allowed in the code. We did go further, and Petronella has worked out an agreement with the church down the street to allow parking for staff. We would not expect visitors or support services to drive and park down the street at the church and then walk over to the facility. So if we needed the extra space, we would have the church parking and require all staff to park there, and that would allow the entirety of the parking lot to be used for visitors. We have not, other than an agreement, we have not proposed an adjustment to that, but we do have that agreement with the church. Another question was regarding residential care facility and memory care facilities. So a residential care facility is basically, this building is going to be a permanent residence for these elderly, and the residential aspect comes in, and in some jurisdictions they've even changed their land use to consider these household livings, and this is because a residential care facility basically has one common dining area, one common kitchen area, and these people reside here as their permanent home, and staff comes in to help them with daily needs such as eating, keeping track of medication. They help them with bathing, with changing, with keeping their rooms clean. But these residents do not drive. They do not leave the site on their own to go visit anything. So different than, let's say, independent living or even assisted living, where they're just assisted with certain things that they need help with. This is a total reliance on help for all of their daily needs. And then the ground level of this building is proposed as a memory care facility. That goes one step further and caters to needs. It caters to the elderly with a dementia diagnosis. But this facility does not provide rehabilitation. It does not provide on-site amenities like coffee shops or things that are open to the public. It doesn't provide a medical facility. If they need to see a doctor, either a doctor will come in or they would leave and go to the hospital. There's no actual medical facility here. So that's the difference between some uses and residential care facility. I do want to mention that memory care is only allowed on the ground floor, and therefore we're only proposing memory care on the first level. With regards to the second story windows, we do have a requirement to provide windows in all the resident units, just like any other home. natural light is important. We do have a requirement from the state to provide blinds for privacy and for shading during the summer hours if somebody wanted to shade their room. As far as the trees are concerned, we do believe we have large enough setbacks. There are a few trees that come near the property line that are on neighboring properties. I don't know if this would help or not, but we did set back our building far enough to where we are not proposing any part of the building that is 2-story within a drip line. Further, we could at building permit or however this is done as a condition, we could provide arborist report showing where that tree protection fencing could be set up. We're open to that. We're not against, you know, bringing in an expert to tell us how we can better protect existing trees. Our intention is not to remove or damage any existing trees on neighbors' properties. And as far as a 24-hour point of contact or a good neighbor agreement, we're also completely open to working on something like that as well. And Petronella can add to that if she wants. As far as construction hours, maybe this makes things easier, but I've never seen a jurisdiction that allows construction after 7 p.m. So we're not planning to be framing or you know, doing any kind of excavation or foundations after 6 or 7 p.m. anyway. So we're open to a condition specific to this property, whether that would be I don't know, kosher or not with the city, but we're okay with reducing it from a 10 p.m. hour. More than likely, the Petronella and Daniel will be living at their property during construction, so it's their complete intention to not disrupt neighbors as well as their lifestyle either during this construction. I know I probably missed something, but for now I could take questions.
Okay, what questions do we have from commissioners?
Okay, I just found the unmute button. I was
Okay.
clicking all over everything there. It's Edward, right? Edward's who's been speaking, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Couldn't see it on my screen there. I listened intently to what you said about parking. And I think in the early stages, I had heard about the parking at the church. And my concern was that patients, visitors would have to park there and walk too. You kind of redefined that and said that that would be for staff parking. I appreciate that. Is there anything, and it's not that every day or in every hour there's going to be visitors, but is there something in agreement that's going to be part of the documentation that you do have in writing, something from the church that could be used for your staff? And is your staff going to park there on as a regular part of their position, or just they have to move it if someone comes and they can't find parking? You know what I'm saying? Is that where you're going to ask them to park every day so that other people can come and park in the spots that are available there? Is that a part of a record somewhere?
We don't have that as part of the record in detail. We do have a signed letter from the church with the agreement to allow us to use their parking. And if we were to use their parking, pending, looks like an approval of a parking adjustment, we would make it a staff requirement that all staff would have to park there. That way, it's not something like, well, you guys can park here, but if a visitor comes, you need to move your car, because obviously from a logistical standpoint, that probably wouldn't work out very well.
Exactly.
So we would make it a requirement, and I'm sure Petronella agrees with this, we would make it a requirement for staff to park at the church, and that way the parking lot during visitor hours is always open to visiting or to visitors.
And that would be satisfactory to meet my concerns. My concerns were not just for visitors, but also for the neighbors, because I know while I was told earlier that nobody had requested to have extra parking, no one would. It's just the fact that I want to make sure it's convenient for, as I said, visitors, and I want to make sure the neighbors don't feel like they're being imposed upon us. People have to drive around through the neighborhood and park somewhere other than at your location. So I think that you've answered my question. I just would like to see it more in writing somewhere. Thank you.
And Pete, I don't know if that would be part of our language in a parking adjustment or how that part would work. I guess we
Yeah,
would-
I don't know, Eddie. We can talk through that when we're deliberating, I think, after public comment.
Commissioner Guile, is there anything else?
No, that satisfies my concern. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, Commissioner Gage, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes. Edward, I was wondering, does the church have a limitation as to how many parking spaces they're going to allow your employees to take and use?
There wasn't a limitation in the letter, no.
Okay. And how many employees do you think you'll have at any one given time that would have a need for parking?
I can let Petronella elaborate on this, but I believe during the highest basically staffing level of the day, which would be the day shift and the swing shift, I believe it would be somewhere around 7 or 8 staff members. So we're not looking at, they have a pretty large parking lot, so we're not looking at using up 30 of their parking spaces. It'd probably be somewhere between 7 and 10 parking spots.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer.
Yeah, I had more of a suggestion about the trees. I'm seeing on this map, the aerial photo, the trees to the east. There's some pretty big ones. And when I went there to look at the property, I could see that, they're in the neighbor's property, but they hang into the subject property quite a ways. And it may not be, the drip line may not be over the building now, but at some point it definitely could end up there. So if I remember you mentioned you may be open to a good neighbor agreement, and that would definitely be something to put in there, that in the day when it comes, where the branches are, hanging over the building, and branches over a building aren't very good for it. They plug up the gutters, they cause mold in attics, other things that's been addressed before you get there. Because once you get there, if you start cutting on the trees, although they are above your property, the neighbor may not be happy about it. So I think it'd be good to address that early and before you get there. That's my suggestion.
Okay,
That was it.
thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
anything else from any of the other commissioners? Commissioner Stoll.
Yeah, I have a question for staff that came up during this presentation. I don't know if this now is the good time for that, but
That's fine, go ahead.
Okay. If an applicant was going to apply to build a home of this size on this lot with this many rooms, with the intent of renting each room to an individual person and having a communal kitchen as sort of a giant roommate house, would that be permitted without having to come to the Planning Commission? Is there a bedroom limit on a house? If this was not, if it was this building, but it wasn't a residential care facility?
No, the limitation comes into place for the length of duration of the renting.
Okay.
You can rent out as many bedrooms as you want, but it needs to be at least 30 days. If it falls below 30 days, then it's acting like a hotel or a B&B, and then it would come.
But it's a bunch of people living there permanently. This is their permanent residence. Okay, thank you.
Anything from any of the other commissioners before I jump in with a couple of things? Not seeing any hands waving. At one point, Mr. Radulescu, maybe you can address this. At one point, there was a comment by a neighbor that it appeared from the prints that there were actually 33 rooms and not 30. Can you clarify that, please?
Yes, it's actually 30 rooms, not 33. It might have been an activity room or some other room as part of the use, but we are only proposing 30 rooms with 30 beds.
Okay, that was my next question. Those are all single occupancy rooms?
Correct, they're private rooms.
Okay, so 30 residents would be the maximum.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I gotta look at my notes here, sorry. Concerning the parking, and I understand what you said about staff not being allowed to park on site. Would you be willing to go one step further and say that it's visitor parking only? And what I'm getting at, I realize that these individuals aren't going to be driving, but speaking from personal experience, a 94-year-old relative who drove and was in an assisted living facility, drove until he was 94, which was frightening enough, but actually hung onto his car in his parking space for an additional 2 years before he figured out what he was going to do with the vehicle. And so I wouldn't want to, can we spell out something that long-term storage of residents' cars would not be allowed in those spaces either?
Yes, and I believe it's probably spoken more in detail in the licensing agreement and the policies and procedures for the facility. I do know that when a resident is interested to move into a place like this, they are told that they would not be able to have a car at the site or parked there. There's not going to be spaces that they can pay rent to reserve or keep. I don't know what kind of document we can provide for that, Petronell. I don't know if that's something that's in your contract with the as part of your operating agreement with your residents, but I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, that would be in our residency agreement that nobody would have a car. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ms. Turway.
Sorry to chime in again,
No.
but I just want to raise a flag that we are in front of our skis a bit, because we're talking about asking for conditions and criteria about the number of parking stalls associated with the parking agreement that hasn't been submitted. And so the things that we don't know are why do they need the additional spaces, and why, and how many of those additional spaces they need, and if this church can handle the parking agreement itself. So we have a requirement for site plan design review approval of all parking agreements, separate from the also requirement to go over the parking adjustment. So my just concern is that we don't have any findings explaining how the adjustment criteria are met, even if they may be. So I think if we come back another meeting or they submit something, that would be good information to get. I just want to, again, acknowledge that since we're diving into some details about something that is not actually submitted. So I just want to acknowledge a procedural dilemma there.
Okay, thank you.
But Laura, asking those questions, if we were to vote tonight, those would be pertinent information to decide whether this location is ready to accept the future that it's projecting. And that's why I was asking those questions, because without that knowledge, how could we approve it that they were ready?
Yeah, the questions are good. You couldn't vote tonight on a parking adjustment because they haven't submitted one. So if you were to vote tonight, it would exclude the parking agreement, the parking adjustment, because one has not been turned in.
But the parking adjustment, is that, considering the one at the church, is that considered a parking adjustment? Because it has nothing to do with the city. That's between the builder and the church.
That is incorrect. The city still approves parking agreements. And one of the things that we look at when we approve parking agreements is that you haven't gone over your maximum parking, which this does. And so that's how the parking agreement is connected to the parking adjustment.
So then I'll ask on the parking maximums, does the parking maximums include not only employees, but visitors? In other words, like at a veterinary service or another place, anything, does your parking and your codes say you can only have this many, even though you may have a lot of visitors? Hey, a weed shop could have 1,000 people in front of it. But I'm saying, is the code saying that that's the maximum you can have? And does that take into consideration employees plus visitors? Is that really a fair code?
It does, and there may be certain cases where someone might want to go over the maximum, but I just want to make sure we get the appropriate process to review that. So what are the criteria for going over, and do they have the need and meet those criteria for doing that?
So in other words, you're saying that if we don't have the appropriate parking, what you just said, I can't think of the words, that if I even wanted to vote on this tonight, I wouldn't, because we don't have the appropriate parking codes or parking, what did you just say? Parking what?
Yeah, you have no findings. You don't
No
know.
findings, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't given you what the criteria is for parking adjustment. And so there's no findings supporting if it could or could not be approved.
Okay, is parking codes part of some future looky in the comprehensive plan coming up? Because it seems to be very limiting in a lot of situations that I've seen over the past several months or years. Is that something in the comprehensive plan that you'll be addressing, or was that codes that we already went over?
We're not changing any codes with the comprehensive plan process.
Okay, so in other words, parking codes stay the way they are. You have a maximum and a minimum. Wow.
Right.
Who thought of that one? Sorry. Thanks.
You could add a future project to look at that if you wanted to, but
I won't
to
be around.
honest,
Thank you, Laura.
Commissioner Stoll, looked like you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so the fact that the applicant has said that this parking agreement exists, have they now essentially outed themselves such that they have to make a parking adjustment application? Are they required to now because they've said that they have an agreement to have more spots than they're allowed to?
yeah, and they were supposed to have an approval to do an agreement in the first place anyway. So yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff at this point? All right, then we will move on to public comment. First would be any representatives of the neighborhood association, and I don't think the neighborhood association is active. So we'll move on to general public comments. And Ms. Teray, I hope you have the list. Just a couple of reminders. Begin with your name and city of residence. Please try to hold your comments to 3 minutes. And I don't want to be dismissive of public comment, but it would be wonderful if we could stick to new information that we have not already heard. That's just a personal request. All right, public comments.
All right, and also to add to that, because this is a Zoom format, if you want to state your address or email Pete Walter directly, then we can send you a notice of decision. First up is Ms. Winter.
Hi there, my name is Michelle Winters and I live in Oregon City. Our home is directly east of the memory care facility. And most of my questions, really all of them have already been brought up. So I don't want to, beat a dead horse, just like Mr. Mitchell said. But I just need to say a couple things. And one is that we feel that it definitely does alter the neighborhood. You're going from a 4,000 square foot facility to over 9,000 square foot facility. And the homes around us are basically 1,500 square feet. we do, our family does have a lot of concerns about sun in our backyard, the garden that we grow every year. So, and we do have some parking, concerns about people parking on our street because it is closer to the facility than parking over at the church. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don't misunderstand me. I don't want to stifle public comment. If there's things people need to say, please. We usually on this planning commission find ourselves starved for public input. So the good news on this one is we're not starved for input. So we do appreciate hearing it. Commissioner Stoll, I think you had something.
Yeah, just a question. So your property is to the east of the subject property?
Correct.
So the only time that the subject property would provide your yard with shade is in the last half hour of the day. Is that right? Because the sun sets. The only time the sun is the only time the building is between yourself and the sun is at the very end of the day when the sun sets. That's as I drove by today at noon, and it occurred to me that's only the end of the day is when it would actually be shading your garden.
Correct. It is at the end of the day. Yes. Because in the summer, the sun is in a different spot anyway.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Winters, thank you very much for your comment. Who's next?
The next is Jerry Yarberry.
My name is Jerry Yarberry, and I too live in Oregon City, and I believe you've got my residence address and email address. The proposed conditional use will alter the character of our neighborhood. The commercial appearance and size of the proposed building will significantly change the look and feel of our primarily single-family home area. The applicant has stated that there are several other properties that are densely developed and aren't single-family homes. They use as examples the 3 churches, a school, and a corner market. The 3 churches are all set way back off of the main street. And as a result, they don't look out of place. And they also have dozens of parking places at the churches. The corner market and the school have been in our neighborhood for more than 40 years. The market is a neighborhood convenience, and there's adequate off-street parking for that market. The school isn't even visible from the street. We've all talked about parking as a concern in our neighborhood. Please note that parking is not allowed on the north side of Warner Parrott Road. So the folks who live on that side, if they have guests visiting, they're parking on our side, if you will, of Warner Parrott. The suggestion that the applicant has a verbal parking agreement with a church in the area, but hasn't specified which church. At the November meeting, the applicant suggested it would be the Methodist Church on South End Road. Well, that church is 9/10 of a mile away. If it's the Baptist Church on Warner Parrott, that's 1/3 of a mile away. And if it's the Redemption Church on Warner Parrott, that's 4/10 of a mile away. In any of those cases, it's not realistic that their employees would be available to park there and then walk in. So they're going to have some sort of a shuttle. It just, to my thinking, if they're going to have 7 to 10 employees that are going to need parking at a church, it's not practical. Also, we need to restate that the parking directly in front of the proposed expansion has been shortened significantly by the fact that their mailbox is right in the middle of their parking area. And you can't park near a mailbox during the week or on Saturday. This proposed building will directly affect the neighborhood livability due to the huge proposed second story on this building. The shade study for Lake Oswego has been presented. The map provided does not take into consideration that the second story of the building will extend well into the rear of the lot, where there currently is no structure and very few trees. So it's definitely going to change the shade to the Winters property to my property and to the 4 other properties that are involved. The proposed building will put into shade an area that currently is in sun. Additionally, the 6 properties will have second-story windows looking directly into our backyards. These are areas that are currently prized possessions of ours. They're private yards, and they won't be if you've got people with windows looking into your backyard. Once again, as a directly affected property owner of more than 36 years in the neighborhood, I request the commission deny the application. And I also request, as was presented to me in an email, that no decision be made tonight. Thank you. Yes.
Can you confer, can you give us some more information? What are you talking about? An email that said nothing about it, something about no decision tonight? What are you referring to?
I got an email from the project coordinator saying that there would not be a decision made tonight.
The email was that staff is recommending a continuance.
Right, that there was a recommended of a continuance, that no decision would be made. Is that correct?
That's different from saying there no decision will be made. It's up to the planning commission. We're making a recommendation for continuance.
So you could continue it and make a decision?
We could continue it, or we could make a decision.
Well, you can't.
That would be up to the planning commission.
The staff recommendation is for continuance.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Stoll, did you have something?
Yeah, I had a comment and a question for Mr. Yarberry. First off, thank you very much for directly addressing your testimony to the applicable code. That's really rare. It doesn't happen very much, and I really appreciate that.
Certainly.
Secondly, what changes, in your opinion, what changes could the applicant make that would make this project acceptable to you, if there are any?
I don't see that it's a practical application for the neighborhood. Okay. Once again, if you take a look at the physical look of that building, it looks like a commercial building. And if it's allowed, what's going to happen to prevent the next commercial looking building from not being approved? You know, this is a single family home residential neighborhood. And as Mrs. Winters has indicated, most of the homes around here are 1,000 to 1,500 square feet. We're looking at a monster of a building. Doesn't fit.
So there's no changes they could make that would make the project acceptable to you?
I don't see them. I really don't.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Radulescu, you'll have an opportunity to rebut anything that you heard when we get to the end of the public comment. Yeah, okay, so Mr. Yarberry, thank you very much. Who is next on public comment?
Sorry, we have nobody else signed up, though we have had people join since we put them in order.
Okay, so if anyone, is there anyone now who wants to provide a public comment? You'd have to unmute yourself so you can let us know that you want to make a comment.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
Mr. Gifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and planning commissioners. My name is William Gifford and I live in Oregon City. I've spoken before about this this particular project, and my concern continues that there have been 3 continuances thus far. And I think, in my opinion, it's time to stop the continuances. I think a vote needs to be taken tonight. I think from my perspective, just as an objective observer, the applicant has bent over backwards to try to meet every concern that neighbors have raised, with the exception that there's nothing that they could do that could satisfy them. And if the criteria is there's nothing that can be done, well, I think you either need to accept that as true or move on beyond it. The logical fallacy of the slippery slope of if this commercial building is permitted, then the next one will come and the next one will come, and soon this will be wall-to-wall commercial buildings down here, is indeed a logical fallacy. This particular applicant has been a property owner in this neighborhood already. It's already a two-story home. The fact that it is the extensions are made to the south end of the building, I would contend that the shade is going to be, any additional shade is going to be minimal, and it will only be during a few hours of the day. I can't imagine that it's going to be impacting anyone's quality of life. The issue of some old people peeking out the window into someone's backyard as a voyeur, to me is I'm sorry, it seems a little bit on the edge. The fact that most of these people are probably not going to even be looking out the window. The fact that they have a little bit of light, they will be shaded windows, seems to me like, let them have their windows. I don't see a reason to delay this further. The fact that this has already been delayed because of a request by the the Community Development Department to provide additional information was again not required by for the applicant to supply that, but I think it was freely done by the applicant. Again, I think the applicant is doing everything possible, and in some people's view, there's nothing that they could do that would make it acceptable. I think you have to move beyond that perspective and realize that if everything is being done and it's all legal, it really needs to be permitted, and I would encourage you to vote on this project tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Gifford. Any other public comment? I don't see any. So at this point, Mr. Radulescu or Donovan's, you have the opportunity to rebut anything that you heard in the public comment.
Thank you. I do want to just touch lightly on the comment that was brought up about the building looking too commercial for the area. I do know there was a section in the code, and it's been a while since I've looked at it, but I know that we've addressed it in there somewhere. Maybe Pete remembers the exact code reference, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But we did address things in there, like I think there's a specific section in the code that talks about using materials, finishes, and similar architecture that reflects the nearby neighborhood. You know, we proposed a building that kept a similar look to what you would see in a residential home, with the exception to the size. I mean, obviously, the building is a lot larger, but it's not larger than, say, if you were to split this lot. Currently, there's a 4,500 square foot house on there. And if we split the lot and built another 4,500 two-story house in the back, that would be a 9,000 square foot development with a building mass similar to what we've proposed. We've given the roof a sloped pitch similar that you would see on residential properties. We've used all residential style finishes, materials, windows, colors, landscaping. We've tried to split the parking lot up into two smaller parking areas with landscaping and other elements between them, as opposed to, you know, yes, a church is set further back, but I could argue that a parking lot is not really a residential type of setting. I mean, a large parking lot is what most jurisdictions are trying to hide by forcing people to place parking behind a building or on the side of a building behind a facade wall. So I do want to argue that we did look at it and tried to design and use finishes and similar features that you would find in residential construction. I think that was it. Thank you.
So just a couple comments. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I really appreciate your time in being here tonight. I don't have anything addition to add to what Eddie has added, but I've looked at all of the testimonies that were brought forth in the continuance. I had no idea that we were supposed to be there, or else I would have been there to rebuttal some of those comments that were made. But I do, appreciate, all of my neighbors, and I do not want to go against them. Absolutely, we would be, open to having a number that, I can share. That would be my number. If there's any concerns or anything like that, I make one of those contracts. Regarding the trees, absolutely. We don't want to take down the trees. That's not why we're here. And matter of fact, we added additional green spaces to be able to protect the look of it. But if there's any direct questions for me, I'd be happy to answer anybody. I mean, we're in this industry for over 20-something years, both my husband and I appreciate the comments that were made, regarding the way we take care of the residents. With some of our neighbors actually made the comment on one of the continuance. But we love what we do. This is what we do, and we want it not to go against the neighborhood, not to go against, what we have here. We're Oregon City residents too. We love this place. This is our home, and we'd love to be able to do what is needed in our community. And I also do a lot of work with the state of Oregon. In the next 10 to 15 years, we're not going to have enough housing to house the elderly that's going to need them. So that's the baby boomers are coming, and there's housing that's going to be needed. So I just wanted to throw that as well out there. I just can't, emphasize enough. I love what I do, and I'm hoping for a decision tonight, if that's all possible. And again, if there's any questions for me or my husband, I'd love to answer them.
Before I ask commissioners about any questions, for the record, would you just please identify yourself and your city of residence? Thanks.
Sorry, my name is Petronella Donovan, and I do live in Oregon City.
Okay, are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Donovan? Okay, I don't see any. At this point, Ms. Turway, I think I need some input from you procedurally where we go next with this in terms of deliberation, decision, continuance. What about this parking agreement that we don't have any information about? Can you give us, and the 120-day deadline, obviously, give us some perspective on where we're at?
I'll defer to Carrie. It looks like she unmuted.
Okay.
Well, I think Ms. Turway needs to weigh in about the parking plan. So I'll let her do that first, and then we can talk about timing and your options with respect to a continuance.
Okay, so for the parking plan, the procedure is if somebody wants to go over the number of stalls that they're allowed, they submit a parking adjustment. If they want to have an agreement for offsite parking with another place, they submit a site plan design review. Both of those things are missing from this record and hearing. So what we're missing is what the criteria for a parking adjustment is, what the rationale for compliance with that adjustment is. We know that the original application came in and presumably they had enough parking, and now there's the need for an adjustment, and we're just, so you couldn't, I don't believe you could approve it tonight with this offsite parking without the process of going through the parking adjustment, submitting the application, paying the fee, giving people notice so that they can respond to their criteria. So I fear the option of just talking about it without having the opportunity for public input on those comments is not appropriate. But if that didn't exist and that wasn't part of the application, say that it was the planning commission didn't acknowledge it and didn't permit it, then you can do that. And so there is a way where you could approve it now, and then if they need more parking, like they've added the adjustment, then they can come back for a type 3 planning commission parking adjustment at a future date if they want to. But as of today, there's just a procedural matter missing, which is the process around approving a parking adjustment.
So Ms. Turway, if the planning commission decides that the proposed 8 parking space, off-street parking spaces that the applicant proposes are sufficient to satisfy the criteria, that's the only way forward other than denial at this point. Reliance on the church lot is not an option before them.
Unless it gets submitted for an adjustment, correct?
Carrie and Laura?
I might suggest, Chair Mitchell, that you close the public record and have a deliberation, and then you can decide if you want to reopen the record, if that's where you want to go. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Carrie
Yeah.
and Laura, can I ask a question?
go ahead.
I think I've seen it in other ones where we did an approval based on a not a continuance, but based on something being applied later, being approved later. I can't remember what the situation was, but it seems to me we've done that on a couple of occasions where, okay, let's move ahead with the approval of this based on the fact that this will be the parking, whatever you want to call it, will be approved in the future, or at least looked at in the future. Is that a possibility?
That's not a possibility in this case, because you can't condition something that's uncertain like that. If in order to approve, you have to be satisfied that there is sufficient parking and that the impacts don't impact the neighborhood. So those are some of the applicable findings that you might find in this criteria. So if you wouldn't be able to have those findings if you also condition them for further approval in the process in the future.
And did I understand you to say there's a fee for adding more parking?
There's a fee for the process. So what's missing is just the process. That's correct.
And this is the first time this whole process, I mean, I've addressed parking since the beginning of this, whatever it was, August or whatever. And this is the first time I've ever heard that there's a process for additional parking.
This is the first hearing that we've had since it was added. So that this would have been the first time you would have heard us talk about it. This is the first time that we've in a hearing discussed that there is this other parking lot.
We've had hearings before. If I went back, I would say that I brought it up and said I wasn't happy with the on-street parking there, but whatever you say.
That's correct. So in response, they added this. This needs a process in order to be incorporated into the record.
Okay.
Or
And it
into our
wasn't,
findings.
and the steps
Right.
weren't there. Boy, we need a chart, a checkoff chart to make sure everything's being looked at. Okay, thanks, Laura and Carrie.
Mr. Radulescu, I'm going to jump back to you here. Did you have something you wanted to add on this matter?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think it was already answered, but at this point, we haven't submitted a parking adjustment because we kind of did that. Originally we thought we could take care of it privately with the church, where we would get an agreement and just have a process for our staff or for our client staff to use their parking lot when it's open. We haven't submitted an adjustment as part of this, and currently, the application meets the minimum and maximum requirement for parking. I don't know if it's is that another planning commission hearing for additional parking, or is it a staff level decision? If it could be made a condition of approval, I don't know. But at this point, we haven't submitted it as an adjustment because we thought that would be something we can take care of privately since we currently meet code for the number of parking spaces required.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Yeah, my question is, since they, like he just said, since they didn't actually need a parking adjustment and they had enough parking per city code, was a parking adjustment conversation about satisfying the neighbors' concerns, or where did that come up from? Because it almost sounds like you're creating a problem for yourselves by even bringing this up.
Yes, and I understand we kind of opened a can of worms regarding it because
That's how
we
it
did
sounds.
do it. We did do it in response to well, we had talks with the church, and you know, with the holiday and with other things coming up and their schedules, we did talk to them. We reached an agreement, but we mainly treated that agreement as something that we did on the private side on our own. Currently, we meet code, but we didn't want to just say, "Hey, sorry guys, we meet code. Forget your concerns." We didn't go one step further to see if where else can we get parking from. We kind of did that on our own on the back end, you know, as a response to the neighbors themselves.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's kind of what it looked like from here.
I'm sorry, can you, I froze up in the middle of Commissioner Schlagenhofer's comment. Did everybody else do the same thing?
It was just you. You actually dropped out of the meeting.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, would you mind going back?
Oh, sure. So my question was, since their parking, the parking that they had provided in their plans had met code, I asked why they brought the parking adjustment up, and was it something that they were bringing up to satisfy the concerns of the neighbors? And that is kind of what happened. They're trying to go above and beyond what they were required to do, and created this problem for themselves that they didn't even need to look for more parking. And in an effort to do that, they created this.
Okay. Thank you for catching me up.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments from any of the commissioners? So I'm going to go with Ms. Richter's suggestion, and we are going to close the public hearing and move on to deliberation. And I think the first question is, are the planning commissioners comfortable with going ahead to a decision ignoring any parking agreement? Because that's not something that is that's a part of the application at this time. Am I explaining that right?
Yeah.
Commissioner Stoll, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I have a procedural question for staff and Ms. Richter. Reviewing the meeting packet, the information, some of the stuff has been introduced in less than 7 days prior, and so there hasn't been the requisite 7 days for the public to review it. If we were to approve tonight, are we opening ourselves up to a successful appeal based on that? Based on them not having 7 days to review?
The public is not entitled to 7 days to review materials. They're entitled to a reasonable time. And I believe Mr. Walter posted the materials on, I want to say Friday again. And it sounded to me from the testimony that everyone had an opportunity to review those materials. We don't have findings responding to those materials. So a decision tonight will need to be tentative, and we need to put together findings. But I don't think we're getting ourselves in hot water by taking action tonight without having 7 days.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? So
I've got a comment, Mike.
Commissioner Staggs.
I just want to make it crystal clear in my brain. So as of right now, the project meets the parking requirements. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
But, sorry, just to follow up, Pete,
But by proposing additional parking off-site, they haven't yeah, you're right. They've entered evidence into the record that doesn't meet code because the parking is calculated based on it's being tied to the use, whether it's on-site or off-site.
And on my behalf, just on me, I'm not comfortable with moving forward and with 7 days and without that parking being a part of it. That's just me. I wouldn't expect others to agree with me on that one.
So, Mr. Yarber, we closed the public record. I'll give you a shot here, but I want to hear from some of the other commissioners here first.
No, I can appreciate that. I'm not clear if there's going to be a continuation of the public hearing or not. Because that was what staff recommended.
We have not made that determination yet. That's what we're discussing right now.
Okay, thank you.
So, based on the comments from Ms. Richter and Mr. Walter a moment, the applicant has submitted information regarding this parking agreement without enough information to make it be a complete part of the application. So, do they have the option right now of saying, strike that, we don't want to do any of that? Or do we need to go down that road and they have to provide it formally at another meeting?
Just so we're clear, the specific code standard that you're referring to is chapter 17.52015, Planning Commission Adjustment of Parking Standards.
so I think that they could withdraw their shared church proposal now if the planning commission wanted to invite them to do so. But I also want to point out, I think that there's a question of the applicant meets the minimum and maximum parking standards that are clear and objective, right? But there's this discretionary conditional use, neighborhood livability criteria that might dictate a greater number of parking spaces, which I think is why the applicant proposed use of the church lot. And so if the applicant wants to withdraw that now and rely solely on their 8 off-street spaces and the on-street spaces and claim and assert that satisfies the standards, that's fine. But there are 2 sets of standards here. There's the clear and objective ones, the 8 maximum, and then this more amorphous livability, interfere with primary uses, conditional use analysis that might direct the commission in a different direction. So.
Yeah, and I guess I hate to have us do something that in effect takes a step backwards in terms of what in terms of handling an issue that has been brought up by the neighbors. The applicant kind of went beyond what was required by putting forward that shared agreement. And now that they've done it, for us to yank it off the table seems like a step backwards in terms of that livability question. thoughts from commissioners?
If I could add a
Tom, you're muted.
clarification.
Go ahead, Mr. Walter.
Thanks. You know, my thinking about this was we need to adopt findings that augment the existing staff report and the existing recommendation if this parking agreement is going to be approved and then made part of the record. So whether that's a separate application that needs to be filed, that's something that we can administrate. We do need to get those findings before you though, at some point.
I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering, can we move forward with the application as is and
We've,
apply?
Mr. Redler, we've closed the
Okay.
public hearing. At this point, we can't entertain your question.
Mike, I have a thought.
Commissioner Staggs.
So one path forward tonight is to make a decision, but it would require the applicant to remove this parking proposal. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Right.
That's right.
And then they could address the parking separately as a separate application. If they wanted to add more parking, they could do it separately in a separate application to go above and beyond what the concerns of the neighborhood are.
It is still a type 3 application.
Or do we have to leave that over?
And
Okay.
the flip side of that, I'm going to argue the other side of that, and I think this is what Commissioner Guile would say if he wanted to, is that the removal of that extra parking could cause a commissioner to vote to deny this application when they would otherwise approve it if that additional parking was included.
I understand. I get that.
I would just want to, the applicant has a choice to keep it in and apply for a parking adjustment or withdraw it. You might want to ask the applicant which path they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that might dictate our next steps.
Okay, then at this point, I will reopen the public hearing and we can hear from Mr. Bradalewski or the Donovans or both on how they want to go forward on this. Ms. Richter, it looks like you have a concern with where we're headed here. Are you wanting to say something? Okay.
No, I don't have a concern. I appreciate the formal opening of the hearing again and the invitation for the applicant to testify.
Okay, thank you.
What I was going to ask, and actually Commissioner Staggs asked it for me, was can we move forward with an application that meets the parking requirement as is, but apply separately for a type 3 review of an adjustment to the parking. And I know that could maybe sway a decision of a commissioner, but could it be somehow made as part of a condition that we have a parking agreement in place before certificate of occupancy or anything like that? Because I don't want somebody to think that, you know, we're withdrawing a parking agreement in order to have a decision that, let's say, gets approved, and then the neighbors are thinking that, well, these guys are not going to come back and apply for anything. You know, I want, I guess, what is our process? What are our options? Because if at all possible, we would like to avoid a continuance, but I also don't want to withdraw, like Commissioner Mitchell said, take one step backward from what we talked to the neighbors about already.
Your pathway forward in this case would be to ask for a continuance and in the interim apply for a parking adjustment. And then we would have those findings. We couldn't condition a parking adjustment because we don't even know if you meet the criteria for a parking adjustment. So we couldn't base our approval on something that might get denied. So you could either withdraw the shared parking agreement and take your chances with the commission with just your existing parking. If you do that, I would talk more about who uses the parking and how often and when, or you could submit the application for an adjustment and explain why you need the additional parking, and then we can come back next time. I don't know that we have enough findings for a decision tonight anyway, because we have a lot of new evidence without any findings related to it. But
Petronella, did you want to make a decision on that?
Can I interject, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Spell.
Two things. One, we've been at this for 2 hours and the applicant is at a decision point. If this was an in-person meeting in the past, we would have taken a 5-minute break. We would have stepped out in the hall. Applicant and their hired expert help, hired help, excuse me. Their architect or representatives, that's what I'm looking for. They would have a chance to discuss it in private, not in front of us. I'd like to give them the chance if they want to step away and just talk on the phone real quick, or however they want to do it. If they want to consult with each other so that they can discuss it with their representative, not in front of the planning commission.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
I appreciate that. If we can get a couple of minutes, I can mute my microphone and just give Petronella a call, because we're obviously not in the same place. So
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we will stand by. Just mute yourselves and turn your backs or something in case somebody knows how to read, and we'll be waiting for you to come back.
hey, Carrie, can we do an intro of the next agenda item while this is happening?
Sure. It's legislative files though, so we won't have the 197.763 disclosures.
Okay, let's go ahead then. Might as well use the time.
Do we need to close the public record first?
No, because they're going to come back and.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. Or does that put this into the public record for that?
That was my concern.
Should I close the public record for the moment?
Sure.
Okay. Public record is closed on GLUA-20-000020.
And then the public record is open for.
Oh, okay. Public record is open then for GLUA 20-00033.
All right, thank you, Chair Mitchell, Planning Commissioners. My name is Christina Robertson Gardner. I'm a senior planner with Oregon City, and tonight you have before you a legislative file for amendments to the Water Master Plan. I have a quick 4-slide overview of process, and then I'll be handing it off to Patty Nelson, Oregon City Senior Engineer, to talk a little bit about the details of the application. As described by Ms. Richter, this is a legislative process, which means there are public hearings at the Planning and City Commission level. Legislative files are not bound by the state land use deadline of 120 days, and therefore the number of hearings is at the discretion of each hearings body. For legislative files, you do not need to disclose ex parte conversation, as that's the point of legislative processes, is to have conversations with the community and jointly work together to refine our comprehensive plans and codes, but you do need to disclose actual conflicts of interest. So just a general overview, this is a proposal for amendments to an updated water system model and capital improvement list for the Water Master Plan. The city has an updated model which incorporated information including current adopted design standards, consumption rates, gross rates, and expansion of systems since 2012, including current system operation data. We hired professional services to put together a refined capital improvement list. The updated modeling was used to evaluate the water distribution system and then evaluated our needs for the next 20 years. There are sections of the water master plan which are being amended, not a whole replacement. So within the staff report, you will see the sections that are recommended for replacement, as well as the capital improvement projects and water distribution line maps. For legislative files, your criteria for approval are Chapter 17.6H, which looks at the 6.8, which looks at zoning changes and comprehensive plan amendments. Our Oregon City Comprehensive Plan, applicable goals and policies, and state land use goals. Staff has prepared a staff report with draft findings for the above criteria, which can be updated and incorporated additional Planning Commission comments and findings if that comes about as through this deliberation. Staff recommends approval of this file of the Water Master Plan to the City Commission with a tentative date of January 20th, 2021. And through this process, please let staff know if you have any questions or need additional information. At this time, if we want to keep going, I can pass this over to Patty Nelson, our Senior Project Engineer, which will outlay kind of the background and purpose of the project.
Yeah, might as well keep going.
Okay. Good evening. Hang on just a second. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Good evening. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of our amendment. Real quick, with the master plan, it's required by state, as you probably know, to be adopted, but more importantly, is we're really focused on providing quality, reliable water to our customers now and in the future. The master plan works towards that goal by evaluating the existing water system and identifying needed improvements to meet existing and future demands. And the focus is on the urban growth boundary. So to date, we have a 2012 master plan that was adopted. In 2017, staff noticed that some of the information in the master plan wasn't matching with our operational and implementation challenges. And so we hired a consultant to look at the master plan, and they did an analysis and presented that to the City Commission. What we are presenting tonight is incorporating those updates by amending the master plan to reflect those. So some of the challenges we identified were issues with our transmission main reliability, pressure issues within the system, and future growth refinement. How the amendment addresses it is we did an updated hydraulic model. That's for engineers, that's really exciting, probably not for planning, but the model really incorporates a lot of different things. So we updated to reflect the existing system. It's actually grown since 2012, so it's updated for that. Growth projections and current standards. One of the big improvements was really working with our operations team and making sure that the model reflects what the system is actually seeing. And pressure was part of that. So we really worked to refine the model to better reflect the pressure in the system. From that, we have an updated capital improvement project list that addresses those challenges. And then we did some refinements in the concept plan area. So even though the 2012 included the urban growth area and a lot of these concept planned areas like the South End, Beaver Creek, Park Place, we actually have updated and refined those areas since then. We've had different development proposals come in. We've realized some topographic challenges, especially in Park Place, so some minor alignment changes. And this is just a big overview. So on the left is the 2012, and on the right is the 2020. So you can see that we consistently have storage needs identified Park Place in both places. And also down in the South End or Beaver Creek area, we have the reservoirs identified. But you'll see some changes, and Park Place is probably a good one to look at. In 2012, they drew a straight line for the water lines. If you look over here, you can see the lines are actually meandering. Well, that's reflecting the topography in the area. So it's not as easy to draw a straight line with the water line. So some minor alignment changes. Probably a major change that you'll see here is the transmission main, which you're actually seeing part of it being constructed on the Malala project right now. One of the issues we're facing is that when we're trying, I just did an article in the Trail News, so if you read that, we're pumping all of the time from Mountain View Pump Station to serve that south end and that Beaver Creek area. That's a lot of pressure, and it's really hard on the transmission mains. So what this master plan does is identify a parallel transmission main that we'll be putting in there that addresses not only pressure issues we have in the system, but also providing better reliability in that end. So just a quick summary. The service area is the same. Urban growth boundary is the same. We've just done some updates to reflect current standards, codes, in the existing system. The implementation challenges have been addressed. And really, ultimately, what this amendment does is improves our ability to provide service to our existing customers as well as for new development. So that's it. If I take questions.
Okay, I think what we'll do, looks like Mr. Radulescu is back.
Okay.
So we will move back over to the other items. So I will close the public record on GLUA 20-00033 and reopen the public hearing on GLUA 20-00020. And Mr. Radulescu, what can you tell us about your conversation with your clients?
So we've discussed it, and we are going to request a continuance in order for us to apply for the parking adjustment. We feel that we've done it. We kind of researched it and worked with the church in an effort to, alleviate some of the concerns from the neighbors. And I feel we want to move forward with that adjustment. I know, perhaps to some, there's nothing we can do to make this, viable for them. But as much as we can do, we'd like to move forward and do that. And so we are going to request the parking adjustment and the continuance. I do want to ask, what is the process for the continuance, and how does that look? And as far as dates and record being held open and that sort of logistics.
Ms. Turway or Ms. Richter, who can answer that? Ms. Turway, probably.
Pete, would you like me to respond, or you want to respond?
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
All right. So with the continuance, we would also need an extension for the 120-day date. So there's no more. The next meeting that we're having is January 11th. We send out the agenda 1 week in advance. So we would need the information from you before that. So we would have time to write a staff report. I'd have to talk to Pete to see how much time we would need to write a report. You may actually miss the January 11th and hit the January 25th meeting. Sorry, now that I'm talking about it a little more out loud. So Pete can send you a timeline of when we would need the submittal by in order to write the report up.
I can have
Carrie,
the submittal tomorrow.
Carrie, we have to renotice that, right?
I think you're gonna have to notice the parking adjustment. I don't think you have to notice the continued hearing.
Right.
I think you're going to need a 120-day extension until March 1st or March 3rd, which would be 30 days, I think. And I think if, it's a matter of how quickly, I'm not sure how complicated the application looks. So, it's a matter of how quickly the applicant can get it to you and how quickly you can turn it around. But I think we will need to give notice of that adjustment proposal.
So with our noticing timelines, we'd have to notice that at the first week of January, which means we would need it to look it over to make sure it's complete and all that. So Pete, does the end of next week sound reasonable?
I
If
will
they
do what
turn,
I can to facilitate this application.
okay. Thanks, Pete. You're so good with this. So that is having Pete work extra
That's fine.
extra long and extra hard during the holidays. So I want to acknowledge
I'm not
that.
going anywhere.
I don't know your vacation schedule right there, but I hope. So
Vacation. Sorry.
yeah, so next week, we need it by next week. And then you could hit the January 25th hearing date, and then we could meet our noticing requirements to notice that at least 20 days ahead of time.
Yeah, I'll run through the criteria with the applicant tomorrow.
Okay.
And we'll work through that as quickly as we can.
So we would need verbally from the applicant, and then we can get later in writing a continuance of the 120-day date to, let's say, March 8th. Set as some planning commission Monday. And then we would continue the hearing itself to January 25th.
Is that agreeable with the applicant?
If I would have known all of these details, I would have said, no, we're going to withdraw because I have people waiting on me on this and I would want a vote. This is the third continuance we would be doing, and to push it all the way to March, I can't do that.
Just to clarify, the March date is for if your application gets, after the planning commission makes a decision, there's 2 weeks for anyone to appeal that decision, and the city commission has to have a hearing on that appeal. The March date is the time for that to happen. So you would get your decision at the planning commission level before that, so that we would have time to deal with a local appeal should we need one.
So when do I maybe I'm confused with this. When do I get my the actual vote on this? Is that the January 25th date is what I'm hearing?
Yeah, the scenario that we just talked about would assume that there would likely be a vote on January 25th.
You know, I hate to say this, but I wish, we started this whole application a year ago and we went through this process, and I'm sorry, I'm going to vent a little bit here. I wish we could have had all of this done prior to coming here tonight. And for me to go to another continuance for something that we didn't even know we needed. I don't know what else to say about the whole process itself. We could have had all of the, even the survey that we had to, we submitted for the last time's hearing. We had to have not thousands of dollars went into that survey to be able to appease all everything that you guys wanted. And for me to go in another over a month and a half for another decision that I have to, because I have people, as anybody knows this construction thing, I have people waiting on me. The bank is waiting on me. I have other people that they want a decision, and I don't think it's fair to me. And I don't know if that makes any difference to all of you or not. But this is very on our end. It's very. I wish we would have got all of this prior to me coming here today.
I appreciate that, and I can understand your frustration, but all I would say is we didn't ask you for a parking agreement with the church. You brought that forward. And the fact that you brought it forward without sufficient information for us to be able to act on it and consider it as a part of our decision isn't our fault.
Can I address that, Chair? Actually,
Sure.
I was asked by the city to bring that in.
By who specifically?
I hate to throw them under the bus, but you know, but I was asked to bring that in, and that's why I went and I looked for additional parking.
Okay. So let me just make sure I understand. You're withdrawing the agreement for continuance. Is that what you're doing?
Well, I don't know what my, Chair, with all due respects, I don't even know, I want to say, I know this parking issue was a big one, and I do respect what the neighbors are saying, and I don't want to go against them. I know the parking that is needed for this. I've been doing this for 20-something years, and I've had bigger facilities than what I have right now. We're not going to need more than that parking. But I don't want to go and on my defense and do something where, somebody's going to go against me and not be able to pass and then make it a longer process than it already is. And so, I'm kind of in a limbo right now. I mean, for me, it's, I would move forward with the vote tonight, but I know definitely one commissioner's, probably not going to vote for me just because of that parking issue. And I hate for that to be, something that I can't go with forward tonight. And every time it feels like we're coming to one of these, there's always something else that we're trying to appease everybody else. And it's very frustrating on this end. And I'm sorry, that probably doesn't answer your question. I don't think it's just really frustrating on this end. I think what we're going to do is let's just go forward with this, Chair, and not take a vote tonight. Let's do the continuance. But I wanted to have you hear our frustration, and not only that it takes time from this, but the money that we put into this to be able to even get to this point is really on our end really frustrating. And we've tried everything that we could to be able to appease everybody in this situation.
Okay. Understood. And I don't disagree with you. I know, speaking for myself, we spent a lot of time on this, and I would like to keep the process moving. I'll just say that. Commissioner Schlagenhofer, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I wanted to ask staff something. If we were to vote on this tonight, is that, what did you say? Was it a 20-day appeal period that people are allowed after a decision? That would count from today then, if we were to vote?
It's 2 weeks from the notice of decision.
2 weeks?
From the notice of decision.
Okay, but they would have to deal with that anyway if we voted tonight. Okay.
Once we mail a notice of decision.
Okay. So what date would that be? That'd be 2 weeks from today. They'd have to wait anyway. So they still couldn't do anything until about the 1st or 28th. Or is it work days only?
No, it's calendar days.
Calendar days, okay. All right, good. Not trying to sway their decision. I'm just trying to figure everything out. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. Yeah, so let's just go forward. I appreciate all of it. I just wanted you guys to hear my heart.
What do you mean when you say go forward?
Go forward with not taking a vote tonight and doing a continuance.
Okay.
Would you like to extend the 120 to March 8th?
Yes, let's do that. I don't think I have another choice, Laura. Is that correct?
I support your suggestion for extending it. I don't think so, no.
Okay. So yes.
Okay, any other comment from any of the commissioners? All right, then we would, well, I guess it's up to the commissioners. We need a motion to move forward with a vote tonight or a motion for continuance until date certain of January 25th? Did I get that right? Okay. Is there a motion from one of the commissioners? Should I close the public record, Ms. Richter?
No, no. No, if the matter gets, if the motion is to make a decision tonight, then I think we're gonna have deliberation.
Right.
So, we'll close the record if we decide to take an action tonight.
Okay. All right.
Otherwise, the record will remain open, and it will remain open until January 25th.
Okay. So is there a motion from any of the commissioners?
Could we make a motion to vote on it tonight? Even though the applicant has they want a continuance. Could we still
Yes.
vote?
Yes.
So I can make a motion.
Yes, you can.
I can make a motion to approve GLUA -20-00020 with staff, with all of the conditions staff has put on it.
Is that a question or a motion?
It's a motion if it's allowed.
And just procedurally, we would then deliberate before we vote on the motion.
Yeah, I would think you would get a second. And then if there's a second, then we'll have some deliberation after there's a second.
Okay.
I'll second.
Looks like Commissioner Gage is seconded it.
Right. Okay. Ms. Turway.
The application as it stands includes this offsite parking. I want to acknowledge that there's a procedural error since there's been no parking adjustments submitted, and there seems to be insufficient findings related to some of the last minute stuff that's turned in. So those would be my concerns.
So I think what we would be making tonight would be a tentative decision, and then we would return on January 11th with findings. And I think that those findings would say that the applicant is not going to use this church parking without going through a land use approval to do that.
Okay.
So we've got a motion and we have a second. I think, need some deliberation with some direction for staff on what those findings are going to look like. And I think we need to close the public record if that's where folks are headed.
And just to clarify what Ms. Richter just said, so that means that you're okay with the application moving forward without the offsite parking?
Correct. That would be the motion. That would be the motion I believe that Commissioner Schlagenhofer made, and that Commissioner
That was
Gage
that's what I tried to make, yes. That's the motion I wanted to make.
Okay, with or without the parking agreement?
Without the parking agreement because it causes conflicts.
Commissioner Stoll, question?
Yeah, procedural question. Staff has identified that we're making a procedural error here. Does that open up the process to more or less successful appeal in the future?
I think that the findings will say that the applicant included a proposal for off-street parking or off-site parking, additional off-site parking, that the record didn't support that, and that you approved the application without relying on that additional parking, which I think resolves any procedural complication.
Okay.
Because you're not relying on it. You're finding the criteria are satisfied without it.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. made by Commissioner Schlagenhofer, seconded by Commissioner Gage, to approve this item with conditions as indicated by staff. So deliberation, comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I
Close the
wanted
public
to
hearing.
speak a little bit about it.
Oh, hold on. Close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing before the deliberation?
Yeah,
that right?
close the public
Okay.
hearing.
All right, so the public hearing is closed, and now we will deliberate. Thank you, Commissioner Stoll. I didn't get my cart before my horse.
All right, so yeah, I had some things I wanted to say. From the applicants, I've seen nothing but an effort to keep their neighbors happy. Their application was pretty solid before, and some of their continuances were in an effort to answer their neighbors' questions. They came up with a solar study they weren't even required to do, just to try to, to be a good neighbor. And I can appreciate that. And that was the reason I made a motion, was because I feel like they've done everything they could and deserve an answer.
Thank you. Any other comments from other commissioners?
Can I have staff bring up a section of the code on the screen?
Yeah.
The section of the code that we're deliberating on essentially was the objection was raised by Mr. Yarberry regarding the neighborhood livability, and I forget the exact wording, and I'd like to have the exact wording so I can address it properly.
Oh, yeah, that's actually part of the comprehensive plan.
No, one of the conditional
conditional use
approval
criterion?
criteria.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. All right. All right, 1 second. Where's the screen? Sorry.
I should have given you a heads up.
I have 3 screens open, sorry. All right, let's see, where's that presentation? Okay, that should show it.
Yes, that's the one. Proposed use will not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which substantially limits, impairs, or precludes the use of surrounding properties for primary uses listed in the underlying district. So in my mind, this is the crux of what we're being asked to decide. This is the question that we're answering. I need to point out that it's will not alter the characteristics of the surrounding area, not by itself, but as it applies to, limits, impairs, or precludes the use of surrounding properties for primary uses listed in the underlying district. It does alter the character of the neighborhood, but in terms of the size of the building and the average size and appearance of the houses when taken in totality, I don't think that it limits, impairs, or precludes the use of the surrounding properties for the primary uses listed. I'm sensitive to the shade arguments. I'm sensitive to the tree arguments. I'm sensitive to the second floor windows. If this was not a residential care facility, all of those things, it would be approved under type 1 without going to the planning commission. I have a personal problem with the 10-foot with the commercial setbacks being applied in a residential zone, but that's what the code says. So that's what we have to go with. I think that's wrong. I think that's and I think that's an improper code, but the code is for today is what it is as it applies to this application. And those are my thoughts.
Any other comments from commissioners?
Yes, this is Patty. Commissioner Gage, I should say. And I want to mirror what Commissioner Stoll said. That's exactly what I had in my notes and what I would have said with the same meeting. I do empathize with the neighbors. I do empathize with the Donovans. I see both sides, so the decisions we make are not without a lot of great thought. And just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you. Anything else from any of the other commissioners before I speak? I don't see anything. I'm going to talk about a particular first and then more generally. Going off of what Commissioner Stoll just said, I also, and I brought it up earlier tonight, I'm bothered by that 10-foot front setback. And it is within our purview as a planning commission to increase that. In 17.56.010B, permits for conditional uses shall stipulate restrictions or conditions which may include, but are not limited to, a definite time limit to meet such conditions, provisions for a front, side, or rear yard greater than the minimum dimensional standards of the zoning ordinance. So we can, as a planning commission, as I read that, and Ms. Richter, if I'm off base, let me know, but it reads to me like we could change that, require condition of approval that it be a 20-foot front yard setback, which matches up with what is in the R10 zone. And Mr. Walter, I understand how you got to where you got on that, and I'm not criticizing your work. I think this is where the Planning Commission, stirs the soup up a little bit here, based on that compatibility issue. So let's talk about that issue just for a moment, because that would require a modification of Commissioner Schlagenhofer's motion. Do any other commissioners have anything they want to weigh in on versus a 10-foot or 20-foot front yard setback?
So now knowing that that is within our purview to change that, I would be in favor of increasing the setback to 20 feet.
I would as well.
And I would.
I'd be okay with it.
Okay. So then, Commissioner Schlagenhofer, Commissioner Stoll?
I'm sorry, quick question. For staff, if we increase it to 20 feet, will they have to add additional pedestrian amendments, or is that also under our purview?
I would recommend including in your motion that the applicant do that.
I got a question.
Commissioner Stagg.
Pete, are they within the setback in the rear yard already? Are they?
Yes.
Are they
20 foot, yes. So this potentially alters a lot of things, including obviously it changes the architecture of the floor plan and possibly the landscaping and the parking as well.
So right now
maybe not.
So right now they are right at the setback, right at the rear setback.
Correct. Yeah. We'd have to.
Are we discussing changing the rear set? Oh, you mean to move the entire building back 10 feet? Is that what you're saying, Chris?
Well, I'm just asking the question if they are already at the rear setback or not.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It would make it a lot easier if they weren't.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah. Let me just make a quick comment. I'm generally in favor also of the front setback is also something that I'm concerned about. I'll be honest, when I look at the larger, well, I'm not going to say that, never mind, but it is something that I'm considering also.
Exactly how many feet would they have to chop off the front of the building? Would it be another 15?
Would be 10, wouldn't it?
10.
Wouldn't it be 10?
We're at 10 now.
We're at 10, 5 plus the easement, 10 more.
Yes.
I haven't drawn a lot of large buildings. I don't know how big of a problem that creates.
We'd have to ask the applicant.
Okay. I will reopen the public hearing in order for Mr. Radulescu to respond to this.
So we would have to reduce the front of the building by 10 feet, which I don't think it's a make or break thing. I think it's doable, but I do want to bring up an issue that it does create. By bringing the building in 10 feet, we would essentially be losing a parking space because the code requires that the parking spaces be behind the furthest facade of the building. So essentially, we'd be cutting off one parking space, which would be, taking another step back on the parking. I just wanted to throw that out there because I don't want it to be an issue later if that becomes a condition of approval where we would take 10 feet off the front of the building.
Yes, that's because your farthest forward parking spaces are real close to the front, right? So.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, I'm ready. I'm ready to speak up, Mike.
And requesting one parking space in front of the building would require a variance.
Yes.
Which hasn't been applied for.
No.
Okay, Mike.
Commissioner Guile.
I've been really quiet. You notice? I feel for what was the lady's name? What's her name?
Petronella.
I really felt for her while she was talking about what this does to her planning, because I know you hear it all the time. The developers and people who are trying to plan things get pushed back here and pushed back there. And I'm one of those people who pushes back. This 10-foot setback increasing to 20 would mean probably they have to redesign the front part of the building. I'm not sure it's going to be cost for somebody to redo the whole thing. I totally understand it, that why we would consider that. It just seems that that's a last minute kind of a thing. And first we were talking about parking and what you'd have to go through. Now we're redesigning the building. And I feel so sorry for them. And it's one of the reasons why tonight's my last night. Thank God I don't have to make these decisions any further. But I felt for her when she was talking about that. But now that I feel even more so that we're planning on, they need to redesign the building and change their plans for what they had in mind. I don't know what the answer is. There's more of you than me. But I was only concerned with parking, not this part. So, wow, what a decision that needs to be made. And I don't know how you guys are going to handle this. This is a tough one because it's making them make more changes at the last minute.
I think it's a bit too much. I think it's almost cruel and unusual punishment to chop 10 feet off of their building design.
That's what I would have gone with, but I didn't want to say it.
Yeah, no, that's brutal.
I understand it, but it's just so last minute.
It's a major change. You're redesigning the building.
Yeah.
It's not like you're moving a parking spot. You're cutting off the front of their building. It's not a simple change.
Okay, I should close the public hearing again. So the public hearing is closed. We will continue with our deliberations.
I think Mr. Yarberry wants to speak, and since you've given the applicant some opportunities, I think it would be good to allow Mr. Yarberry an opportunity if the chair is willing.
I am. I didn't see that. I apologize. We'll reopen the public hearing. Mr. Yarberry.
I feel like we're playing checkers.
Since the public hearing is reopened, I am going to recommend that we continue this hearing until date certain, January 11th, which was the original recommendation from staff.
Okay, thank you for that comment.
Certainly.
And the public hearing is now closed again, and we still have a motion on the floor. And not having thought about the parking and the last minute nature of it and the fact that they are up against the back setback, yeah. We're kind of in a lesser of two evils situation here.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Staggs. Go ahead.
Would they meet the parking requirement, Pete, if they took 10 feet off the front of the building and lost a parking space?
They need 6 spaces for the residential care and 1 space for the office. Let me pull up the site plan.
They currently have 8 spaces, right?
Let me pull up the site plan here.
Can I ask a quick procedural question?
Sure.
If we vote on this and it fails, can we make another motion with different requirements, different conditions?
Sure. I think it's not, I don't think it's clear at this point what the motion is.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep the,
So I think it
Keep the
would be a
setback
good
as is
idea
in my
for there to
motion.
be a new motion if that's where folks are headed, because I think we've had a motion and a second for, I think what is staff's recommendation. And then there's been discussion about an additional front setback. And so I think we need a new motion.
yeah, I didn't want to change the setback in my motion. I wanted my motion to stand as it was.
In answer to your question, Commissioner Schlagenhofer, it appears that moving the building another 10 feet back would remove the 1 space. But that's a quick and dirty analysis.
Okay.
Which would still keep them at 6 spaces for the facility. But then the question becomes, they need that 7th spot for the office.
And 1 extra spot for the inspector that comes every week.
And then also I want to acknowledge that they can use the adjacent on-street parking to be counted towards their minimum as well. So from the purely code perspective, if you reduce the number of on-site parking, they would be okay as long as there's adjacent on-street parking.
They haven't relied on that off-street on-street parking as counting towards their minimum.
But they can.
But they can.
Okay.
Mike, I'd like to suggest that we stick with the current motion and second and proceed with a vote.
All right. Is there any other comment from any other commissioners?
I agree.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, which is to approve POUA 20-00020 with conditions as provided in the staff report.
As a tentative decision, and we will return on January 11th with final findings for adoption.
And the findings will relate to the parking agreement.
Parking.
Right. Okay. Everybody understand what we're voting on?
Yeah.
Okay. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer,
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll,
Aye.
Commissioner Gage,
Aye.
Commissioner Guile,
Knowing that it looks like it's going to pass, standing by my original grounds, I vote no.
Commissioner Staggs,
Aye.
Chair Mitchell.
Aye.
All right, motion approved. So we will be back on January 11th with final findings.
I'm a loner once again.
Isn't that appropriate for your last meeting?
Yes, exactly. And it's all in your lap on January 11th. Good luck.
Okay.
Also, for the record, I just want to acknowledge that the record is closed, or so there's no new testimony between now and January 11th. And we do not anticipate reopening the record on January 11th, correct?
No. And to be honest, I have lost track of whether it's open or closed. So I'll just say for the record that the public record is closed. Okay, so that moves us back to, well, okay. We're at 9:46. We have to stop at 10 o'clock unless we have unanimous agreement to continue after that. What's the pleasure of the commission? Do we dive back into GLUA, the water master plan amendments, knowing that we need a couple of minutes at the end of the meeting for another topic? We want to go back to that for a few minutes, or do we want to stay right where we're at and final comments and close the meeting?
Any idea
Or
how much
extend,
longer
or
staff
extend.
needs?
I'm for final comments and close the meeting.
The other thing, yeah, we would need a motion and a unanimous vote from the commissioners to continue past 10 o'clock.
I think it's a majority vote now, not unanimous.
You're right. You're right. That changed.
But
Anyone want to make that motion?
Make the motion to continue or make the motion to end it now and carry it on after?
We need a motion to extend past 10 o'clock. Otherwise, we're done at 10 o'clock. We don't need a motion to stop at 10. That's automatic.
What do we have left?
To go past that. Pardon me?
What do we have left? The water
Just some
plan,
final
the
comments.
questions for the engineer on the water plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Patty, do we have an estimation of how much longer you think the presentation would take?
I'm done with the presentation. It's just questions.
Oh.
I make a motion, we continue.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Moved and seconded to continue. Go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Staggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Guile,
Hell, if I'm going to be a no 2 times in that one night. Okay.
Commissioner Gage,
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll.
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer,
Yeah, let's do it.
Chair Mitchell,
Aye.
motion approved.
Okay, so we were back on GLUA 20-00033. The public record is reopened on that item, and we're ready to entertain questions for Ms. Nelson.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen real quick again.
I'm going to start with just a procedural question. What is our role in this process?
Well, I'll answer that. Your role as Planning Commission is to review it, ask questions. As the Planning Commission, you look at amendments to the comprehensive plan and the ancillary documents to make sure that they are adhering to our goals and policies. So if something comes in that's really out of sync with the city's goals and policy, the public hearing is a chance for you to ask those questions. As a kind of a development and review board, your eye is a little bit on looking at how these may affect future land use decisions, and is this work consistent kind of with some of your future roles as a planning commission? So those are kind of the things, but really the key piece of a legislative file is the proposal consistent with the comprehensive plan goals and policies, state land use goals, and our comprehensive plan chapter of our municipal code.
I can say, if any of you are worried about it, I am pretty plugged into.
Who are we hearing there?
Yeah.
Not sure.
Sorry,
Not
it was
me.
Commissioner Guile. I muted him.
Oh, okay.
Mike, I've got.
That's great that you have that power.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christina.
Yeah.
Did I do something wrong?
No, I think
I
we
had, the
had
commission meeting on in the background. I'm sorry.
Okay. What questions or comments from commissioners?
I have a question.
Commissioner Staggs.
in the spirit of what you just described, Christina, how does this water master plan amendment how does it encourage and make the path forward for future development? How does it impact that? How does it impact future development?
Sure. That sounds like a more technical answer. I'm going to give you the planning answer, which is this looks like it has a lot more refinement than our original 2012 plan. So when applicants do come in for an application, we have a lot more information based on current use data. Whereas in the 2012 plan, current example that Patty provided was, a lot like a transportation system plan. We said we need a line from A to B, and it was a straight line because we didn't have that refinement level. And with this version, the they've done more analysis and looked at topography and provide better locations. So that is an example of there's more refined information when an applicant comes in. There's more refinement about the specific location of a reservoir. As it relates to that piece of the development application, our capital improvement plan is just a piece of the puzzle of how we implement and how the city moves forward and looks at rates or moves forward to look at how best to implement our capital improvement plan. But for an applicant, this provides a lot more clarity than the 2012 plan had if they were coming in with a development application.
One follow-up question to that is, does this amendment in any way affect the area of Oregon City that's on Main Street? Are there any improvements that are happening or going to happen down there?
Sure. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to Patty Nelson, our senior engineer, because she'll have more detail on specific projects.
Hi. So I'm just looking at this map that we have here, and I apologize, I don't have the list of projects in front of me, but it does look like we have, and where's my cursor? Some mainline work down here. I can't tell you specifically what that project is, but I could provide that separately. And I think that's one of the benefits, I think, of this amendment is we really worked with our operations folks, and where a computer model may not be seeing things, they were able to inform and flag areas of concern. And there's pressure issues down in the Main Street area. So those were things that were flagged. And as a result, the amendment reflects improvements to address some of those challenges.
Are there any issues with the water pressure in that part of the city right now in terms of serving the Main Street area?
We have pressure, it's late, sorry. We have pressure relief valves, pressure reducing valves, all through that area. And actually one of the main projects we're working on is to replace and upgrade those. So yes, it's a high pressure area, but we have elements in the system in place to control that.
Okay, thank you.
So basically what this plan is doing, this update is, it's providing more detailed information, and it's updating usage and issues. Instead of being 2012 information, it's 2020 information.
Yeah, including update to capital improvement project. You'll see there are more proposed capital improvement projects in the 2020 amendment than there were in 2012.
Right. Yeah, and that was another question that I had. This calls for a reservoir, I think it's called Holly Lane Reservoir, that essentially serves the Park Place concept plan area, right?
Yes.
And then there's another one, I don't remember the name of it, in the Glen Oak area that is to serve the Thimble Creek concept plan area.
Correct.
So within whatever the timeline horizon is of this project, of this plan, if those two areas were not built out, would we need those 2 reservoirs? That may be another
No,
question.
we didn't do an analysis that looked at not serving those areas, right? The analysis is always done assuming that we have to provide a system to serve the urban growth area. So I can't answer that question, but in those areas, there's growth projected. And so we have additional storage needs, which was identified in 2012 and is also reflected in the amendment as well for both those areas.
Okay.
Is the red stuff built already?
No, the red stuff are the new projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
How far into the future will it take us to finish all that?
It's a 20-year plan.
And one thing to remind everybody that, utilities are built kind of 2 different ways. One as part of a development application that's proportionally required by a development, and 2 as a city initiated capital improvement project. So for example, in the Thimble Creek area, many of those lines may be built based on development application. There may be other projects that really are more suited for a capital improvement project.
Is that determined beforehand? Which ones are capital improvements
No.
and which ones are by development?
No, the lines are identified as capital improvement projects and as projects, but as development comes in, if you are required to provide services for your development as proportional to your impact. Now, there are some ability to get system development credits if you're building above and beyond your proportional impact. And that's how sometimes we work with development applications that come in that need to serve, a larger line that maybe they may be triggering for their own development.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one more. I got one more question. As I was looking at that, there's a chart with projected costs, and I think the bottom line on that was 80 some odd $million. But in another place, it said that the possible range that estimate could be off on the high side was from 30 to 100%. So did I understand, is that really saying that what we need to do could cost us $160 million? You're muted.
Are you referring to the cost estimate information that's included in the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so that's standard practice. When you're doing a planning level document, you have a kind of a level of accuracy for your engineering estimates. And it's typical to be, I think you said 30%, 30 to 40, even 50%.
It said 30 to 100.
I'd have to look specifically. I can't imagine 100 would be unusual. If you had a specific spot, I could look at that, but
yeah.
I could dig that up. But it's standard practice. There's standard estimating approaches. And for a planning level, because you don't know the detail, you have kind of the reason the accuracy isn't there is you don't have the detail. So the further you get into design, the more accurate your estimates get. So I think in answer to your question, we feel comfortable enough that the estimates are sufficient to build the infrastructure and moving forward, if that's your concern.
Yeah, that basically is it just caught me. $80 million caught my eye, and then
right.
$80 million and possibly off by 100%.
I
really caught my eye.
So
I'm looking at the report, and I'm having a real hard time finding the cost thing.
So it's usually called like a level of accuracy for the estimate. And again, I think planning level, I think I saw in this, it was 30 to 50%, I want to say, which can be pretty typical. But, I've talked with our engineers because we're also looking at, we're funding for this, right? And there's a level of confidence that, they feel like we should be good. So I feel confident in it moving forward.
Okay.
Quick thought, Mike.
Uh-huh.
That estimate includes both capital improvements and private development, correct?
It covers all projects in there. So you're correct. Some of the projects would be built by the developers.
Yeah, on page 93 of the staff report that we were given tonight.
Uh-oh.
It has total CIP project costs of $80,264,000. And then in the notes, it said the expected accuracy range is 20 to 50% on the low end and plus 30 to plus 100% on the high.
I missed that, and I would have to look at that, and I don't have that in front of me.
It caught my eye, and obviously it's not anything, that this is all going to take years and years and years, at least 20 years, if not more. So I shouldn't get too wound up about it tonight, especially given the hour.
Well, and a lot of my experiences is also on the design end, and what you end up doing when you have these planning estimates is as you're going through the projects, you're looking for ways, right, to come within those budgets, and you work through the details.
I see. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, so Christina, what's our next step?
Well, next step, if there is a motion this evening to recommend approval, staff has a tentative date of January 20th to go to the City Commission. In your deliberations, if there's anything you want to forward on to the City Commission policy-wise, you can do that in your deliberations, and we can forward that on in the staff report to them.
Just a quick question. Did we take testimony? I noticed we have a member of the public here as well.
We did not.
Okay, is the member of the public who's here wishing to provide comment on this item?
It's Vera Wilson.
So I guess we assume that means no comment.
Yes.
Well, I guess all I would say is that's obviously is way over my head. I'm not an engineer, and I'm definitely not a water engineer. So I don't know that I could add anything or make any recommendation other than what is in this report, and pass our recommendation on to the City Commission. I'm certainly not going to try to modify this thing.
That's all I'm feeling.
Same
Okay.
here.
Does someone have a motion?
Just a quick question, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I know we're all want to.
No, you're fine.
Here. Are there any provisions in the water master plan for any kind of artistic expression of the water in the city? And yeah, I'm not even sure if this is the right part of this to talk about this or not, but I know there's a couple of spots in the city where we have this kind of artistic expression of water. Is that been discussed? Is that a part of this? Should it be some other discussion?
Is this related to like Singer Hill and Singer Falls, which is more of, I think, a stormwater stream facility compared to the water lines? I don't believe, are you requesting comment about any future kind of a large scale fountain the city may own or something like that?
Christina, I'm not sure what
Okay.
I mean. I'm just, what I'm trying to get to, the question I'm asking is this the appropriate amendment for us to make comments like such as something like, could we use this amendment as a mechanism to bring a more expression of the water into the city in an artistic way? thereby enhancing the city, enhancing the quality of life, et cetera, et cetera.
Is this sort of like the Portland 5% of every public works project has to go towards art thing? Is that what you're angling towards?
I'm just saying, could we introduce or have the water master plan somehow address those things and make Oregon City a better place to live by having some kind of expression of the water? It may be better served in a totally different place. So I'm just asking the question.
I think my answer, and I can let Patty comment, is a lot of these are service lines and closed loop service lines underground, stormwater facilities, TSP transportation facilities. There may be, I think, other above ground, have a lot more nexus to that conversation than kind of a below ground looped water system.
Right. Okay. Great. Fair enough.
I'm curious what you mean by expression of water. What does that mean to you? What would you be looking for?
Well, for example, in downtown Oregon City, there's the kind of artistic waterfall element that we see in the city, and it's sort of a celebration of water, but it's also an artistic thing. It's an art piece in the city. And I think Christina just answered the question. I mean, it's if we're talking about closed loop pipes in the ground here, it'd probably be better discussed in some other part of our city planning and the city master plan. So.
Okay.
Okay, any other thoughts from any of the commissioners? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the water master plan amendment that we're discussing.
Hold on, I'll bring it back up. There we go.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve GLUA 200033 and LEG 1900002 amendments to the water master plan.
Second.
I second it for my last time.
There you go. Let's do that. Moved by Commissioner Staggs and seconded by Commissioner Guile. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, let's go ahead with the vote.
All right, let's call on Commissioner Guile first.
Oh, I don't know. Aye.
Commissioner Staggs.
Aye.
Commissioner Gage.
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll.
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer.
Aye.
Chair Mitchell.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Okay. At this point, as has been referred to a couple of times this evening, this is not only it's also Commissioner Johnson's last meeting, and unfortunately he couldn't be with us tonight, but this is Commissioner Guile's last meeting. And I think this phrase actually came up earlier tonight, but I think you would have to consider 8 years on the Planning Commission as cruel and unusual punishment. And Tom, you did it to yourself. And I just want to say, and I'll let anybody else say anything they want to say, but I'll say for myself, over the last couple of years, and even before that, watching you on the Planning Commission, but certainly these last couple of years, no one is more of an advocate for the point of view of the average citizen in Oregon City. And I know that at times you ask questions knowing full well what the answer was, but you wanted to not only get that on the record, you wanted to make sure that staff knew you were paying attention to those kind of things as well. And I really respect the way that you have looked out for the common citizen, whether what your comment was, whether it's in black and white in the code, or whether was your impression of how things ought to be. You always made sure that the Oregon City citizen was well represented. And I, on behalf of myself and the rest of the Planning Commission or whoever wants to say anything, thank you for those 8 years. You've been a real strong contributor.
Gee, thank you. I'll say a few words if nobody else has anything. And
I just
I'll
want
just
to
say
give a second to what Mike said.
Oh, thank you, Greg.
And a third.
Do I hear a fourth, a
A
fifth, and a
fourth.
sixth? No. I been thinking about this a lot. I almost started getting emotional with my last second. But I wanted to let you all know, in the public, whoever listens to these, that I've really been honored to have been a part. I joke all the time, like you saw me a couple of weeks ago raising my hands like, oh yeah, I'm finally, it's going to come to an end. 3 years as chair of the CIC, 8 years of this. That's 11 years of my life there with volunteering with the city. But I've been honored to have been a part of it, but I've learned a lot from like the previous chairs of the Planning Commission, Charles Kidwell, Denise McGriff, sitting next to Damon Mabey. All these people have taught me so much over the years. I may have started off with green behind the ears, but being around these individuals, I've learned that don't be shy. Every one of those ask questions of developers and of the applicants, and ask questions of the city as well. Because sometimes you have to ask the city, what are you trying to accomplish here? But I always say, ask questions. The public is watching us. We sit there kind of with not very many people in there, even more so nowadays. And the public is watching us on television. They may not elect us, but they wonder where we're coming from and what our stance is, and who appointed us and why the heck we're even there sometimes, because it doesn't appear that we're always listening to them. So I may have sometimes I walked away, and as I've told Laura, I've sometimes seemed like a disruptor, arguing with Carrie, arguing with this person or that person. And I don't mean to be a disruptor. It's because I've learned from some of the best to ask questions and keep at it. If you really feel something strong enough, ask and continue to ask. So sorry if I've ever seemed that way to all of you, but it's just what I've been trained to do by some of the best. So I thank you all for your patience with me. 4 of you are brand new, have not been around me very long. And those who have moved on to other things. So thank you all. And please, all of you, I watched in the last couple of years, some of you have been pretty quiet. So keep asking questions and plugging away and get to the bottom of things for the public to hear you. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Anyone else? Anything? Laura.
I just want to acknowledge that it is hard being a planning commissioner. You obviously have to read a lot of things, and they're from all sorts of realms, from the storm water or water master plan to these very technical issues, and dealing with the public and hearing their concerns and being respectful towards those concerns, and also being a legal body and knowing that the decisions that you make carry weight. And we go to court and we defend those decisions. You're a legal body like a judge. And so it's a lot of responsibility. And so I wanted to thank all the planning commissioners, but specifically Commissioner Guile and Commissioner Johnson for dedicating so much of your time and your life towards making sure that Oregon City has good governance and that we're able to administer a land use system in the way that we ought to be. It takes all of us to run this, and I really appreciate it. Without you guys, there would be no us.
One other thought, as we interviewed the people tonight, I'm glad some of the questions that we asked them, but I was joking that I have lots of coffee and alert pills. And hell, at my age, we're trying to take sleeping pills to sleep at night. And here I am, I don't even drink coffee, but trying to read through some of those documents that you give us. Oh my God, how can you stay awake past page 12? That's a lot to read.
I'm going to keep emailing them to you, Tom.
I remember sitting next to a print shop on Main Street, and Denise McGriff would walk in there and come out with a stack 10 inches thick, because she'd print out every single thing down there at the print shop to read every page. So it's a lot. So good luck, everybody. You got a lot coming your way with Park Place Master Plan, the Beaver Creek, all that stuff, all the stuff south end. You've got so much coming your way. I'm glad I'm getting out now. Good luck.
Been nice to work with you, Tom.
Thanks, Betty.
Yep. Laura, do you have anything else communication wise?
I'll keep it really short. I just wanted to tell you that we're going to have a joint work session with Historic Review Board on January 11th. So every year we do the Land Use 101. We're going to combine the two for the first part of Land Use 101. And then as we need more specific questions and guidance, we can kind of peel that off to more specific to each body. So if you have any questions or concerns or anything you would like us to talk about, please let me know. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the City Commission has directed staff to look into amending the municipal code for annexations, the annexation factors, to provide more certainty or specificity about how utilities will be reviewed at annexation stage, and more certainty that the funding and the timing of those utilities will be in when development needs it. And so on the City Commission agenda for tomorrow night, we'll be coming back to them. Right now, if you look online, there's just a timeline for the project, which is an efficient timeline. But we're hoping to have some red lines to them on Wednesday or slightly before with some of those language. If they want us to proceed with the project, then you'll see it come back as a legislative amendment. But I just wanted to put that on your radar.
Now you talk about annexations.
You're always welcome to make a public comment, Tom.
The meeting on the 11th, will that be at 6 o'clock, an early work session, or will that be at 7?
It'll probably be at 6. I have to go back and look at our schedule to see how much time we need. But
okay, thank you.
And what I guess I assume that if all of the new positions have not been named by that time, that we would hold off on that training. It seems like a shame to do the training and then a month later have new people on either one of the two boards.
we will probably do the training anyway and then get caught up with other people. Because the more training, the better on the Historic Review Board front. We need training before their first hearing when they've may have some stuff going on. So
okay. Understood.
We can, and then for all new attendees, we'll meet with them individually as well. And then we'll give a bunch of written material. And then if this training's already happened, we'll send them the video so they can watch it.
And I assume if any of the planning commissioners have any particular topic they'd like to hear emphasized, they can send that information to you.
Please do.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, one little thing.
Yes, sir.
I think well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Tom. I know it's late now, but I'm going to talk about him anyway. With Tom, you never thought, does this guy care? Because it was pretty obvious that Tom cared. Tom cared about a lot. I'm not talking about him past tense because he died.
I'm dead.
I'm talking because he's, you're not dead, Tom. And he was like a big part of the soul of the planning commission. And when he leaves, we got a big hole, and we're gonna have to work collectively to make sure people know that we still care, because I can't even count the number of times that Tom voted no by himself, and it never deterred him from continuing on his quest to care about everything he's passionate about. And I think that's the best part about him, that he was he had to run solo many times in his quest to put the people of Oregon City first. And I feel bad that he had to do it alone sometimes, often, most of the time. And I think he's just a great guy for it. And he never gave up on that. That makes Tom Tom.
I'm blushing.
And you never made me feel stupid for asking stupid questions. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Dirk. I really appreciated that. That was very nice of you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks again, Tom. And if nobody else has anything else, I don't see anything. Thanks, everybody. It was a long meeting, but I think we made some progress. So thank you all. Stay safe. Happy holidays.
You too.
And see you next
Merry
year.
Christmas. Happy holidays, everybody. Have a great new year.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks, Tom. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.